This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate second and final part of What If Kid Naruto was raised by an emotionless Kakashi. If you enjoy this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no time, let's start the story.
He occasionally caught a glimpse of smooth gray patches as he peered through the dense forest foliage. Normally, walking through the forest would have made it difficult to see the sky. After all, he was encircled by thick, wild vegetation in the center of the Konoha forest. About 50 miles separated us from the closest human. Kakashi, however, wasn't on the ground. He lay on a wide branch, 100 feet above the ground, positioned beneath the leaves so that, should the clouds decide to dump their burdens on the ground, no raindrops would fall on him. He marveled at the soothing effect the activity was having on him as he watched a cloud drift slowly along. Why had he never done this before, he wondered. It was calm. Yes, he slept on missions whenever he could. Sleep when you can, eat when you can, and have sex when you can was the guiding principle of the Anbu veterans. And Kakashi was one of the longest serving Anbu, or rather, he still was, as evidenced by the hound mask fastened to his belt. By now, he was used to doing things like that. Actually, Kakashi had abided by that rule for as long as he had been alive, or at least as long as he had been a shinobi. Well, maybe not the part about having. Efficiency had always been his forte. He had diligently completed a variety of assignments, practiced his skills every day, and submitted reports on time. By the age of 5, he had committed the shinobi rulebook to memory, and he had spent a considerable amount of time living his life according to the rules. He had, therefore, been the very embodiment of a shinobi model. Which, had he been inhuman, would have been fantastic. He had spent a long time going through the motions of life, not life itself. Instead of being a shinobi to live his life, he had lived it to be one. And that had been damaging. In the end, being a shinobi was a way of life, and they were simply carrying on their ancestors' legacy. This is the only explanation a shinobi could offer for being who they were in the end. Cold-blooded killers from birth who brought up others to be equally vicious killers. He would have undoubtedly met a swift and violent end on such a path, though he had occasionally questioned whether such a fate would have been preferable. However, Obito had passed away. Furthermore, by providing the blinded Kakashi with a Sharingan eye, Obito had not only restored his sight but also improved it, opening the remaining eye that had been covered up. In addition to giving Kakashi his sight back, the passing of a boy he had hardly known, though he now referred to him as a friend and brother, had also given him his life. He occasionally questioned whether Obito, the overly sensitive and sometimes naive Obito, had understood what he was doing. However, the Obito he had known in life was very different from the Obito he had witnessed die and buried. He had been exposed to certain things as a result of the sacrifice, but it had also rocked his core. It had caused him to doubt the principles he held in such high regard. Additionally, it had compelled him to sidestep the issue. Additionally, he had lost his last bulwark and plunged further into the unimaginable depths of the shinobi world after his sensei's intentional death. Rin was dead and covered in blood on the ground because he had clung tenaciously and tightly to the last remnants of a life he had never really lived. He refused to continue their relationship after Jiraiya repeatedly urged him to leave the Anbu. Yes, he had suffered from his estrangement from his peers. And now he was hurting. The price of not changing broke his heart. However, it hadn't then. For a while, he had questioned whether he would ever feel anything again because he had been too shocked and too numbed inside to do so. However, a tiny blonde ball of energy had pushed its way into his life and made things change. His life had been completely upended by Naruto. He was hardly recognizable. At his core, he was aware that he had not changed. Maybe he had always been destined to be the person he was today. Everything around him was distorted like a tornado when the child entered his life. The Junin's chest grew constricted. In the same way, he feared the child would speed out of his life. However, the idea of leaving this evening and the send-off he had received made his heart sing. Naruto pouted into his ramen bowl. Kakashi looked up at the boy as he put on the final piece of his armor. The child had an unhealthy appetite for the food, so it was unusual to see him leave a bowl of ramen untouched. Not hungry? Naruto gave him a menacing glare. No, he replied. This time, Naruto frowned at him and said, "You know, not eating isn't going to change anything." Kakashi suppressed a laugh. At times, Naruto was a brat. He was a cute brat, though. "I thought you said you would never refuse a bowl of free ramen, Naru-chan." "Don't call me that." The sarcastic, "Hi, Kaka," that Kakashi said caused Naruto to smile lopsidedly. Hey, Kakashi.ni, why do you have to leave?" He said casually, "I told you. It's a mission." I'm a ninja, and it's my job to do these missions. With huge, pathetic blue eyes, the boy turned to Kakashi and whimpered, but you're my bodyguard. What's gonna happen if something happens and you're not here? Kakashi gave a headshake. Early on in their relationship, Naruto had discovered that Kakashi's eyes had the power to melt most people's hearts, but sadly for him, they were protected by an ice barrier, or so the boy believed. He pretended to be annoyed, but his heart was in agreement with the boy's statement. Naruto. We already went through this once. I have a field mission. Therefore, I have to leave, he said. He should not be forced to abandon Naruto because he was his guardian. In actuality, Sandaime had to summon him and explain things to him before he finally agreed. The Hokage hadn't been at fault. Sandaime actually offered to cover for him and assign someone else after an old friend suggested he accept the mission. He had declined the offer and accepted the mission, despite the fact that he had briefly been overcome by anxiety. As usual, his heart was subordinated to his mind. There were some things that simply could not be changed. During their time together, these separations would occur frequently. Additionally, it would be exhausting to have a verbal and mental argument each time he had to leave for longer than a day. He therefore understood that, despite the pain to both of them, he had to make Naruto become self-sufficient for a while. All he could hope was that his actions would not have any long-term effects on their nascent relationship. Anyway, I'm not your bodyguard, Naruto. I'm your guardian. And as for safety, that's why I'm having Uchiha Ryuga come stay the nights with you and to fetch you from school in the afternoons. On days when he has patrol duty till evening, Hinagata Sensei has offered to make sure you get lunch and to occupy you till he comes. The only thing you have to do is get yourself breakfast on the mornings he has midnight shifts. I don't know why you're sulking, and frankly, I don't see a. He stated, recalling what had occurred previously, when he said them. Determined to leave the room before the child could complain any longer, he said, I don't have the time to find out. I'm leaving and I'll be back in 2 weeks or 3 at the most, yeah. Aniki, the boy's voice sounded, and he stopped, his hand on the door. He turned and said, Nani? The only thing he saw was a sudden flash of blonde before Naruto's unexpected embrace around his neck threw him to the ground. Naruto, he growled menacingly, but the boy's smile distracted him from his words, and he couldn't resist grinning back at the youngster. Kakashi's stern mask slipped and cracked as he laughed back at the boy's laughter. A few moments later, the two were lying on the ground, Kakashi silently reflecting on how wonderful it felt to laugh while Naruto gasped for air. Neither of them could recall why they had started in the first place. The wall separating them vanished in an instant. Once more, he raised an eyebrow at the child. So, I thought you were mad at me? I was. I mean I am. But why? Because you're leaving. But I'll be back, and you have Ryuga-san for company. The words, it's not the same, were spoken quietly by Naruto. This time, Kakashi did give Naruto a smile, but it was in vain because his usual mask was covering his face. Well, I'll be back, okay? Naruto gave a somber nod. Hi. Great. I'll be off then. Be good to Ryuga. Gazing at Kakashi, Naruto rolled his eyes. Kakashi gave him an eye smile. Okay, just try not to play too many pranks on him. Ryuga.ni, won't mind. Oh, you know him so well? Naruto couldn't help but add the parting shot, saying, yeah, besides, he's cooler than you about stuff like that. He gave Kakashi a sly smile. Despite the fact that they had both calmed down in recent months, Naruto knew that there was still a small rivalry between his two brothers that had existed since they first met. He took advantage of this whenever he could. Kakashi gave the boy a fierce look. Cooler than me? Naruto, swallowing. Naruto let out a theatrical gasp. How could that be possible? Someone cooler than my Kakoi Iniki? The boy received a well-earned cuff on the head from Kakashi, who became even more enraged as a result. Itai. Kakashi.ni. HMPH. Anyway, I almost forgot to tell you. Someone else might be watching over you as well. And he might drop in with his Tudo to see you. Huh? Who's his younger brother? Kakashi retorted. You may recognize his younger brother, a certain Uchiha Sasuke. Oh, Sasuke. Yeah, he's a friend. A good friend. So the person is Uchiha Itachi. Ah, you know of him. Yeah, I think he's pretty cool. Sasuke told me his San's only 14 and has been an Anbu captain for a year. Naruto exclaimed with delight. At that, Kakashi stifled a smile. The notion of Naruto and Itachi being friends appealed to him. Naruto is the one who could alter Itachi's fate, which is bound to be bloody. He asked, cooler than me. Kakashi. He mockingly yelled, well, yeah then, I really am late now, it's all your fault, brat. Naruto said slyly, Aniki, weren't you the one who said that I was ruining your reputation? Kakashi gave him an eye. Smile and walked away. That child was a pleasure to have around. And being apart from Naruto worried him. He couldn't sleep, which is why he was up here now, looking at the sky, or what he could see of it. He was plagued by thoughts of Naruto being tortured and was constantly worried about the child. He was unable to fall asleep in the first place, not because he was being awakened by nightmares about the boy. He desperately needed sleep. He was roughly 25 miles from Konoha and another 60 miles from the border's edge, where a number of Konoha shinobi and those dispatched to check on the first victims had vanished. After that, the ninja had been called back from a mission in Wind Country, and one of the ANBU's top trackers had taken over Kakashi's mantle. Unfortunately, there was no one to take the shinobi's place because he had been hurt on the way home. Aside from his predecessor. So here he was again, attempting to put on a mask he believed he had thrown away. It was unfair. The request to reopen a chapter of his life that he had closed only months prior was completely unfair. However, he was aware that life was never fair, and it was his responsibility to follow his Hokage's instructions. Theoretically, he could, of course, refuse a mission. In theory, he might have decided to pursue a career in art as well. When he was younger, he had a passion for drawing. Furthermore, Kakashi had been reasonably certain that he had been good. One of his favorite childhood memories was showing his mother a drawing he had made with a crayon. If he focused hard enough, he could even recall the sound of her laughter as she drew her own pictures and complimented him with laughter. Given that his mother had passed away when he was 3, he must have been very young. He hadn't had time for such pointless pursuits soon after. Despite his genius, the White Fang of Konoha had been a rigorous disciplinarian. Additionally, Kakashi had a reason to become a shinobi after Stone killed his mother. Then, his motivation for becoming a shinobi had been revenge. It makes sense why he had grown tired of his life. From a young age, he had learned that anything that was born out of retaliation was bound to die a hideous, ugly death. And until his revelation today showed him otherwise, he had believed that the only mistake he had left to make was to become fixated on getting revenge. He was therefore mistaken. Oddly enough, though, he had felt relieved to have discovered why he had chosen to become a shinobi. He had started down this path for a reason, for once. His life had real purpose for once. And he felt satisfied, even though that meant little to a man whose chosen profession was probably his death sentence. If you really got to the heart of the matter, you would find that the man in question did not particularly dislike his work. The rush one got in combat was not something he hated. He enjoyed the rush of taking on a formidable opponent. He acknowledged the thrill of learning a new skill and the rush of adrenaline he got from pursuing a slick opponent. Even though he might not publicly acknowledge it, he did enjoy the discomfort he caused other people and the praise he received for being himself. The cries of innocent people, the smell of priceless blood leaking out, and the smell of fear choking him were what he did detest. The fact that his more primitive side enjoyed these feelings and, in a perverse way, even craved them repulsed him. The questions these incidents brought with them, rather than the memories of them, were what woke him up in the middle of the night. He did what he did, but why? He was a shinobi, but what? Why him? He had to do the dirty work, but why? Why exactly? And even though they bothered him, he was unable to stop. Being a shinobi meant life to a man like him. The day he lost his Hite.8 was the day he died. He had answered one of those questions, at least tonight, and there was nothing else he could do, even though he might never discover the answers to the others. In other words, he couldn't simply quit being a shinobi. He had too much experience with harsh, hard steel in his hands. His eyes were too accustomed to concentrating on everything. His ears were too ready for the first incorrect step. Additionally, his nose is too sensitive to strange smells. To put it simply, he would never be able to become a civilian, considering that he had not been born one. However, occasionally his hands recalled holding a hard crayon. His nose occasionally recalled the strong, but not disagreeable, scent of the acrylic paints his mother had stored. His ears occasionally recalled pleasing sounds. But he always saw only red in his eyes. Gray and red. For once, the shinobi was happy with his thoughts as he fell asleep. He would hunt tomorrow. A small, pathetic fire that had long since gone out. The presence of hammocks is concealed from everyone but the trained eye by the creative arrangement of tree branches. Apart from that, there was no indication that a group of men had come through here or been killed. Essentially, it was an ordinary shinobi camp. His eyes told him so. His nose told him otherwise. He had been able to follow the sharp tang of blood all the way here, even though it was 3 miles away. And he felt nearly overwhelmed by it all as he stood here, at the epicenter. However, he had long since learned how to suppress his first instinct, which made him throw up. And he had learned that deliberate blindness was necessary for a clear mind. Before he purposefully opened his senses and let sense flood his, almost, painful channels, he stood there for a moment longer. He identified the location where the stench was most intense. From his position, it was only a few meters away. He gazed at the location for some time, trying to understand why this was the area with the strongest blood odor. This time, he opened only the Sharingan and briefly closed his eyes. Nothing has changed. This area had chakra residue, but not any more than the rest of the campsite, where it was evident that 2 Anbu squads had been massacred. The idea made him shake his head. 2 groups of Konoha's best assassins were eliminated with little resistance, by 1 individual. His forehead was smeared with sweat as he concentrated on the Sharingan. There was no mistaking it. Among the other traces he could see, there was only one other signature, and it lacked the familiar feeling that all other Konoha shinobi possessed. It ought to have been impossible, but there it was. Furthermore, Kakashi was acutely aware of the disparity between shinobi in the higher ranks. He was not a maniacal person. In the same way that a Junin was far superior to a Chunin, even he had to acknowledge that his skill level was significantly higher than that of the average Junin. And it could have happened for someone like him. When Kakashi realized that there was a shinobi on par with him skulking around fire unchecked, something inside of him froze. He fervently prayed that the ninja would be no more powerful than he was. However, he returned to his work, this time with Sharingan closed, and as he looked at the ground, he became enlightened. There was a sizable area that was darker than the others, almost as though the soil had been turned upside down. He used his foot to probe a little of it. The soil felt hard, as if someone had pressed down on it, rather than loose and soft. He went to work. A few moments later, he was gazing down at his friend's decaying bodies. He let out a sigh. Surprisingly, 2 of the bodies had no marks, while the other 8 had minor injuries. Not enough to kill them. The first squad had been dispatched to retrieve the item, which he eventually located. Strangely enough, the murderer had not even bothered to accept it. This indicated that this attack had not been directed at the item, which had merited a S-class mission. For a few seconds, his mind was working frantically. Either he was a psychopath who killed for fun, or the ninja, since he no longer had any doubts, had been coming into fire for a reason. Furthermore, Kakashi was currently leaning more toward the first theory. A group of Anbu should not have been so thoroughly massacred by a shinobi who had taken a break from his craft. With a sigh, he removed the masks as evidence of death and returned the bodies to their graves. Although there was no trail here, he had better return quickly and alert the village if his theory was correct and the shinobi was headed for Konoha. In addition, he needed to inform the hunter.nin of the deceased shinobi's location. With his decision made, Sharingan no Kakashi left for the village and vanished into thin air. His brother Sasuke shouted, "Ni-san, are you ready yet?" loudly. As he completed putting away his armor, Itachi let out a quiet sigh. His brother was so unlike him and so impatient. And although Itachi was generally happy about that, there were times when the boy's whiny demeanor annoyed him. "Ni-san," Itachi yelled, pulling on his usual off-duty attire as his eye twitched at the high-pitched cry. He walked down the stairs and out of the room slowly. The final straw was the comment, "Hurry up, Itachi. You're so slow." Itachi said coldly, "Stop complaining. If you do it again, I'm going alone." The younger brother's shoulders slumped and his eyes flashed with hurt. Itachi recognized the unspoken fact that Sasuke hardly ever had the opportunity to play with his peers. Gee. Gomen ni-san, it's just, me and Naruto were planning what to do during lunch yesterday. He briefly pursed his lips. Sasuke was already being impacted by the clan and their foolish beliefs. In order to keep Sasuke safe, he had spent so much time deliberately trying to be the strong prodigy the Uchiha desired. He had known for a long time that he would meet a horrible and cruel end. However, Sasuke would be willing to accept the hand life had dealt him if it spared him from suffering the same fate. Itachi examined the gaunt youngster in front of him. He observed Sasuke tinkering with the strings encircling the lunchbox he was carrying. Sometimes he was amazed that he could have such intense feelings for such a creature. Uchiha Itachi was well known for his brutality, brilliance, terrifyingly good assassination abilities, and extraordinary proficiency in the Sharingan, the clan's Dujutsu. However, there was no mention of his compassionate nature in that list. His Anbu superiors were known to mutter about that strange Uchiha kid, and the chills he gave them. In fact, Most would argue that he was the complete opposite. Still, he felt a connection to this boy for some reason. He was concerned about Sasuke's future for some reason. Perhaps he just didn't want someone else to experience the same terrible fate as him. However, no, he was motivated to care for the boy, to listen to him, to think about him, and to defend him by something deeper, something intangible. He cared for something. Then, was it blood? Was it the thing that connected them? Just genes? Itachi was strangely troubled because, despite his mind telling him that Sasuke was a worthless weakling, his heart treasured their relationship and his very being yearned to take care of the boy. At the same time, he found strange solace in the idea that maybe there was a higher power in charge of everyone, a rule that was unaffected by cunning people. The unexpected question, Ni-san, do you think I'll be like you one day? Would have shocked Itachi if he hadn't heard it a million times every day. He turned to look at Sasuke, who was gazing up at him with adoration. More questions were raised by the admiration in his brother's eyes. Did Sasuke experience the same thing? Was it his only option to honor his elder brother? What if their positions were reversed? Was Sasuke the first to be born? Would he still have been himself? Or would Itachi have been like him, and would he have become like Itachi? Uchiha Itachi briefly considered what it might have been like to have lived a different life. He then turned to go, letting fate have its way, and he noted absently how Sasuke's eyes gave up the hurt he felt from being ignored. Little brother, fate. There is no escaping fate, and I can't stop hurting you, just as I can't get out of the life that awaits me. Because it was meant to be me who was born first and you second. A couple of hours ago, Ryuga said, "Ohayo, Naruto-kun," to him. Then Naruto said, "Ohayo," to Ryuga. 5 days had passed since Kakashi's departure on a Saturday. Even though Naruto missed his Aniki, his anxiety was lessened by being with Ryuga. In addition, Ryuga had a benefit to living with him. Kakashi was simply unpleasant to be around in the morning. It wasn't that his Ni-san didn't enjoy getting up early. It was Kakashi's habit to rise in the early morning and then vanish. Oh no, it's clear that Hatake Kakashi preferred the mornings. Naruto couldn't play a practical joke on the elite ninja in the morning because he was usually dejected when he returned from these excursions. Even mischievous individuals had a code of conduct, after all. Furthermore, it was unfair to make fun of someone who was depressed. In other words, the person pulling the prank benefited most from it. So Naruto, are you ready? The fact that Ryuga was a Chunin was another advantage, which undoubtedly meant that he had more free time even though it made him less cool than Kakashi. Thus, he had more time to devote to Naruto's training. Naturally, it didn't hurt that Ryuga had taught at the academy for a while, just like many other Chunin. "Hi!" Ryuga exclaimed, giggling at the enthusiastic reaction before adopting an unusually solemn demeanor. "Ah, Naruto, before we begin, I have to ask, why do you want to be a shinobi?" Naruto instantly stopped grinning broadly and gazed into his empty bowl. "Because, I want to be stronger. When I was younger, I wanted to be the Hokage, because I wanted people to know me. I didn't want to be all alone. But, in the past year, since Kakashi.ni took me in, I'm not alone. But I still want to be stronger, so I don't have to rely on others to protect me." Ryuga observed the boy, in awe of his resolute speech. Even though Naruto was young in years, the shinobi realized that the boy had far more experience than the others. He reached out to stack the dishes in the sink and said, "Well, in that case let's start." "Nay, Ryuga. Sensei, where are we going?" The boy's lively personality returned, and he responded, "Well, I know a training place not far from here." "Yosh! Let's go!" Naruto exclaimed as he got up and leapt from the couch. Smirking, Ryuga drew him back before he could get to the door. "Naruto," he sighed, "we have to clean up first, then we have to dress and get your gear." They were standing in a training area near the Uchiha compound 15 minutes later. "Okay, Naruto-kun, show me what you've learned about kunai and shuriken throwing." Naruto spent the next few hours honing his skills at the target boards, with Ryuga providing occasional guidance. After a while, the two concluded it was time to relax. "Ryuga.ni, it's lunchtime." "Ah, I know." Pulling at the Chunin, Naruto exclaimed, "Ryuga.ni. Let's go eat." Ryuga gave the still active child a raised eyebrow. "Go?" "Oh," he said with a gentle smile, "but we're not going anywhere." "But we have to eat, and we will, but we aren't going anywhere." Ryuga responded, "Nope. We're eating here, under this tree." Naruto gazed at Ryuga and asked, He cried out, "But we haven't brought any food." A voice behind Naruto said, I told him I would bring some, but he didn't bring any. A dark, gray-haired stranger who seemed to radiate a sinister aura that seized him and anchored him to the ground caused the boy to spin around in a panic, his heart thumping in his chest. As he took deep breaths in a desperate attempt to avoid hyperventilating, his big blue eyes grew wide. No, not once more. It won't occur again. This time, Ryuga.ni will undoubtedly keep me safe. Yes, but didn't he know Ryuga.san? His vision faltered and a chill ran down his spine. Oi, Naruto, are you okay? He was aware of that voice. Sasuke. He nearly passed out in relief as his gaze fell on the boy holding the stranger's hand. Of course, he wanted to strike himself after glancing at Sasuke's brother. Apart from the gray tinted hair and the lines that prematurely marked the teen's face, the man bore a striking resemblance to Sasuke. Naruto managed to find his voice and compelled himself to respond to the query. Ah, hi, I'm fine. He joked with his friend, you don't look it. Naruto simply stuck out his tongue. Itachi smirked as he observed them, astonished to see how well his brother got along with the other child. As he examined the young boy, he thought, so, this is him. Even shorter than Sasuke, the Kyuubi no Gaki gave off the vibe of a sheltered little boy with his naive blue eyes and bright blonde hair. However, experience beyond age was evident in the fierce warrior that lurked beneath those eyes and in the way he knew exactly what to say to Itachi's stupid tuto. Itachi briefly had the impression that he had met a soulmate. Despite his admiration for the boy, he shuddered at how open the child could be when he smiled foolishly again. Ryuga gave his younger cousin, Itachi, a friendly nod. The teen nodded back. Ryuga. Itachi remarked, it's been a long time, He explained, I haven't seen Sasuke play in a long time. Ryuga gave him a glance. The comparisons had never ceased, with Itachi always being the menacing younger cousin. When he was younger, Ryuga had detested the child who was 10 years his junior but consistently outperformed him in every way. Ryuga was nothing compared to Itachi. Ryuga, however, was also everything that Itachi wasn't. And Ryuga had learned to value that fact as he grew older. And as he looked at Itachi's now prematurely aged face and dark, circled, blank eyes, he was even more relieved that he wasn't a brilliant shinobi. However, it was very different from Itachi to suddenly show open concern for Sasuke, and he could see from his cousin's face that he was being deprived of sleep and that something was gnawing at his soul. He was aware that if he didn't, nobody else would inquire. He was still hesitant, though. How are you? Itachi asked, briefly meeting his eyes. Nothing was necessary for the teenage prodigy to grasp the true nature of the question. How are you handling things? How come you look like a liar? And although he was naturally offended that his cousin Ryuga, an outcast and black sheep in the clan, had asked him that question, he felt compelled to respond honestly because Ryuga shared his belief in their clan's teachings. Itachi realized then that he had previously been hesitant to confide in his cousin because of his pride, but now he fully trusted him. Ryuga gave him a stern look and asked, Ryuga. Senpai, how do you find the Uchiha clan? Although Itachi's dislike of clan rules was well known, he hardly ever expressed it openly. His father was the clan head, and Itachi was the heir apparent, so he just wasn't in a position to live his life the way he wanted to, unlike Ryuga. Things to say and things not to say. He paused, deep in contemplation. Ryuga was aware that Itachi was anything but a submissive dog, even though he had shown deference to the council thus far. Itachi was his own man, whether he was the head's son or not. Furthermore, it was obvious to Ryuga that Itachi was a ticking time bomb. A single misstep, a single improperly cut wire, and the bright clan prodigy would be lost forever down a dark path. In addition, it was unclear if Itachi was here for the clan's benefit or his own. However, despite personal biases and trust issues, Ryuga was a Konoha Chunin. And you weren't a shinobi if you weren't at least somewhat skilled at it. His keen ears and analytical mind picked up on his cousin's nuanced wording. He inquired about the Uchiha clan rather than our clan. He let out a sigh. How did I know you were going to ask me that? Itachi simply looked at him coolly and leveled him. All right, so the man wasn't feeling funny. Itachi didn't respond right away, instead focusing on the two boys who were assiduously practicing their shuriken, throwing and competing with one another. I feel many things about the Uchiha Ichizoku, Itachi.kun. The question is, why do you want to know? Finally, pointing to the two, he said, they get along well, don't they? It's a coincidence really, that they know each other. I never thought that Sasuke would have made his first friend of the Kyuubi kid. But then again, I understand he's an interesting kid. Ah, Naruto.kun is quite a kid. I've never seen a more determined 7-year-old, except for your brother perhaps. They really are familiar. Ryuga responded with caution. The direct question was, do you think they will let them continue as they are? The fact that they referred to the clan was not stated. Ryuga scowled. He was aware that the Uchiha were allegedly involved in the Naruto attack, but how did Itachi know? He gave the teenager a curious look. I ran into Hitaki Senpai at a bar a while ago. Nani? That guy was at a bar. I thought he was supposed to be protecting Naruto. He was investigating Sandame's orders. Ryuga rubbed the back of his neck in shame. Oh. Well, Itachi looked at his cousin. You don't like him? Anyo. Well, no, I don't. Do you? Ryuga inquired, wanting to know Itachi's thoughts on the strange Junin. I respect him. Respect? Ryuga overheard. He was a good taiko, in the hushed awe and devotion. In the voice of Itachi. Interesting, huh? He never would have thought that a man like that could motivate Itachi to stand up for others. Itachi's self-centeredness to actually mutter a few words in support of someone else. You like him? Itachi mentally rolled his eyes. Even though Ryuga didn't have the Sharingan, he occasionally had an eerie knack for solving puzzles. He asked me to help investigate the clan. You agreed? Ryuga asked, not concealing his astonishment at Itachi's willingness to engage in such obviously anti-council activities. I wanted to ask for your help, mine? He asked, startled for the second time in a short period of time. Ryuga felt his eyebrows rise once more. Hi. You've been with the force for 10 years now. Father once told me you were one of his best detectives before. Did Uchiha Sama really tell his heir that? Naturally, though, that was prior to his unfortunate encounter with one of the clan elders. Itachi remarked, you know them in a way I don't. The fact that Itachi had always been a recluse and hardly ever interacted with anyone, even within the clan, was acknowledged by Ryuga. Another factor was that the Anbu captain had never joined the Uchiha police force through the conventional path. However, his young cousin Itachi never followed the rules. The child almost seemed to have an obsession with being different. Ryuga nodded his agreement and suppressed a smirk. How intriguing that the clan prodigy turns to the black sheep for assistance. I wonder what my beloved cousin Aizu, one, would think of this. As the two children carried on with their competition, the two sat on the ground in pleasant silence, eating their bento. Ryuga smiled slightly at how Naruto had completely forgotten about his hunger when Sasuke appeared. Itachi arched an eyebrow in his direction. He tried to sound casual when he said, "Ah, it's nothing. Just that, Naruto and Sasuke seem to be good friends. Ah, it seems my Otuto has finally done something before me." Oh, the older brother said, he has gotten a friend. Ryuga glanced at Itachi as he turned to the side. In stark contrast to his warm, dark eyes, he gazed into those unfathomable depths. Was there a hint of longing in his voice? That the heir to the Uchiha clan could experience loneliness was unimaginable. As the boy bounded toward them, he shook his head and focused on giving Naruto his lunch. Itachi said bluntly, "You are an excellent shuriken player." Naruto had just brought his chopsticks to his lips when he paused. He stumbled. Did the copy.nin train you? With his head tilted to the side, the boy yelled, Copy.nin, who's that? Thankful that the boy had overlooked the gentle remark, Ryuga looked at Sasuke, who had just realized that there was more than just his bento surrounding him. Oi, stupid. Don't you know the copy? Nin? Huh? So I never heard of the guy, big deal. Will you just tell me already? The guy is one of Konoha's elite shinobi. He's really good. So what's his name? Don't know, Sasuke said. He continued, but that doesn't mean he isn't a great ninja. And that you're dumb, cuss you don't know about him. Yeah. He'll never be greater than my ni-san. So there, that's why I don't know, because I don't need to. In an attempt to contain his laughter, Ryuga bit his lip. As the two shinobi watched the children fight over the same man, even Itachi's lips were moving. Hey, I wonder what Cho would think of this. Gah, that guy. His ego doesn't need any more inflation, but he does need a head check. Up. Ryuga murmured. Ignoring his sarcastic remarks, Itachi slowly leaned in the direction of the boys. I am aware of his name, he said calmly. Naruto froze, turning around. Eniki? Exclaimed Sasuke, startled. So, do you want to know? Of course, Naruto said, acknowledging what he had just denied moments before. Nay, ni-san, how do you know that man? At last, Itachi remarked, he was my Anbu Tai. Cho? Sasuke's eyes immediately grew wide. His other life as an Anbu was never mentioned by his Ni-san. Never. Itachi's lips twitched again as Naruto opened his mouth to speak, but Sasuke clamped down on it. What is the copy? Nin's name, Ni-san. 2. Itachi allowed himself to smirk this time as he said, Naruto-kun knows, I am sure. Ryuga should have been embarrassed that a chunin like him couldn't control his bursts of laughter, but instead he had to put down his food. Naruto managed to escape Sasuke's hold. What the? Oi, mister, are you crazy? I just told Sasuke I don't know the stupid copy guy's name, he yelled. But you do, Itachi stated gravely, ignoring the clamorous outcry. Sasuke simply stared in awe of Naruto. He was aware of his blonde friend's loudness, lack of tact, and healthy disdain for authority. However, no one spoke to Itachi. Ni in that manner, not even his father. Naruto was now becoming very agitated. Though occasionally a bit too mischievous for Ryuga, the boy was usually a sweet child. However, Uchiha Ryuga had only witnessed the boy stop smiling once, and it wasn't a pretty sight. He made the decision to intervene. He inhaled first, which helped him relax. Damned giggles. Man chuckled, not giggled. And Shinobi didn't laugh, damn it. Ignoring the pointed lift of the eyebrow directed at him, Ryuga remarked, Ah, Naruto-kun, Itachi is right. You do know him. The copy. Nin is a nickname given to your Ni-san. Itachi had been an older brother for a long time, but the child still had very little experience with how to treat other children. Furthermore, he had been cruelly mocking Naruto. Nevertheless, Ryuga continued to appreciate Naruto's priceless expression. Oh, to return to the time when I could trick those obnoxious elderly people. Naruto exclaimed, Nani, after a moment. You mean, we were fighting, arg, he cried, turning to face Itachi. Teme. Naruto was sitting on a tree branch with his bento. Itachi simply grinned down at the child. Sasuke hurled himself at his brother, Ni-san, but ended up next to Naruto. Silent laughter shook Ryuga's shoulders as he fell against the tree. Oi! Let us down, Itachi said calmly. You'll answer my question, then you'll eat, and then I might disappoint you. What question? Did the copy. Nin train you? No, stupid Kakashi. Ni, he's always too busy to train me. Well, then who taught you to throw? I learned at the academy, and Ryuga. Ni gave me some tips just now. So, other than school, you didn't practice? What? Of course I practice. Itachi looked at him for a second, then nodded resolutely. Tossing up Naruto's chopsticks, he said, You may eat now. As the boys gobbled up their food, Ryuga worriedly asked, What are you planning? Ryuga-san, you have other responsibilities in the village now, he said quietly. Ryuga retorted, Ah, but there's no reason I can't start after Hitaki-san returns. No, it has to be now. I don't know why, but things have been too quiet of late. I'll take over his lessons for now, you can deal with him in the morning and night. I'll take him in the interim. My squads will be on leave for a while. Ryuga was still unsure. Won't the council object to you? Sandame. Sama still has the power to override them, and he will do so if you tell him it's for Naruto's sake. Itachi continued. Those obsidian orbs flashed red for a minute, then bore into him again, saying, Trust me. Whoever is out there isn't to be trifled with, Ryuga. And there might be more there, Itachi said. Slumping against the tree bark, he uttered the words, admitting that he wasn't capable of facing off against even one master of the Sharingan, much less two. Itachi and possibly the Hitaki were the only ones who could. But he was not strong enough to be able to. Ryuga's palms dug into his fingers and he muttered a curse. He didn't have enough power when he needed it and when he wanted it. For a moment, he allowed Naruto's high, naive voice to wash over him. I apologize, Naruto-kun. I'm insufficient. Feeling his chest burn as he pushed his pace, Kakashi frantically leapt past the trees. 3 days and a few hours had passed since he had left the scene of the massacre, and he was only now beginning to approach the outer limits of the forest that surrounded Konoha. As he made his way through the maze of leaves and branches that blocked his way, he chanted, a bit more, just a bit more to the nearest outpost. One particular nasty snarl of brushwood snagged at his face and whipped past him, almost causing him to stumble. Shay, I'm already getting weaker after a year. He felt a wave of relief when he saw the outpost. The dim fires inside served as a lighthouse for him in the still, lightening early morning sky. They were secure. This indicated that Konoha was still upright and that the enigmatic Nin had not yet moved. With Konoha less than 30 minutes away, he doubled his speed and sped past the beckoning light. Uchiha Itachi sensed a familiar presence close by and looked up. "Ohio," Itachi greeted him, his friend, who had previously been a superior officer. "Shisui." He nodded casually, remaining seated on the top of the branch. "So, what is this I hear about you poking around the clan business?" Itachi gave himself permission to grin a little because Shisui was so predictable and always got right to the point. "It's nothing. Just a little private investigation." Itachi recognized a request for clarification when he heard Shisui say nonchalantly, "I heard word that it's about our exterior activities. You've never been one to show interest in that sort of thing, or in any of the clan's business before." "Well, if I am going to inherit my father's seat as council head, I better have some idea of what's going on, haven't I?" "Yes, of course, cousin. However, the matter you've chosen to investigate." Itachi calmly and subtly questioned his mentor, "And what is that?" For a brief moment, Shisui's eyes narrowed. He was Shunshin no Shisui, and he would be damned if he allowed any brat, even Itachi, to make fun of him. He paused to see if Itachi would fall for the ruse and confess, saying, "You know what I'm talking about." The teenager remained silent. After all, he was a boy genius. "You were digging around about the Kyuubi boy. And what's it to you? That had nothing to do with the clan, and I don't see how it concerns you." Shisui attempted the sentimental strategy, saying, "Damn it, Itachi. You're a Uchiha. Whatever you do concerns us. Besides, I thought I was your friend. You know my stand about the council, Shisui. I don't like them. I don't associate with them," he said. "He said, you were trying to find out if we attacked him. Let's see if the prodigy can use deception to get out of this one." "Correction. I was trying to find out if someone with a Sharingan had attacked him." "Oh really? Then why aren't you investigating the most obvious prospect?" Shisui jumped onto the tree branch and moved closer to Itachi, encroaching on his personal space, asking, "HNN, and who would that be?" Despite his reflexes telling him to back off, he chose not to. "HMPH. Which mentally unstable Junin has one Sharingan eye? Who's the only living pupil of our dearly departed Yondaime? Hitaki.san has the Hokage's trust, and yours I am sure. It seems to me, little cousin, that you're rather attached to your former captain? Perhaps more attached to him than our clan. I fear for your loyalty." "My loyalty has always been to Konoha." "How interesting. Especially when Konoha isn't exactly enamored of you. I wonder, dear cousin, why exactly you're investigating this again." "I have my own reasons," he said, glaring at Shisui once more as he wanted the discussion to stop. "Oh, perhaps you're the one who did. Itachi-kun. What's wrong, you look surprised? Is it because I guessed right? After all, Hitaki-san's not the only one with a control problem," he laughed. Itachi stifled the spasm that was about to overwhelm him at the words, grinding out, "Shut up." He gave Shisui a scowl, allowing the other shinobi to sense his level of murderous intent. Shisui's gaze expanded. Keizo. Who would have guessed? Naturally, this Gaki had heard the rumors, but he dismissed them as idle chit-chat. However, there was always some truth to rumors, and Shisui had recently come to the painful realization that Uchiha Itachi was Anbu despite his youth and thin build. He wasn't just any Anbu, though. He was one of the squad captains of the elite unit, the shinobi selected to take Copy Nin Kakashi's place. "It's painful to see how far you've strayed from who you used to be, cousin. Itachi-kun. I did try. Yes, I did. However, your dad, Gomen." Shisui shook his head and made up his mind that this was no time to be weak. He smirked as he gazed up at Itachi coolly. "Well, I'll see you around then, Itachi-kun. Yane," he said as he left, acting as though the tense moments had never happened. Itachi's eyes narrowed as he watched the man go. He hurried to a remote location on the edge of the Konoha forest after waiting until he was unable to sense Shisui's chakra sense. Before letting his control slip, he looked around to see if anyone might have followed him. He had no idea how long he lay there, trembling against the tree bark, until he lost that morning's breakfast on a poor shrub due to the taste of bile in his mouth and the uncontrollable urge to vomit. Too near the damned truth. He always seems to know me, and I detest the way he sneers and smirks and looks at me when he thinks I'm not looking. I feel sorry. Shisui felt sorry for him. He detested that. Since he understood Shisui's sympathy for him, he believed Itachi was going crazy and losing control. His geniuses would not be the first or last of Konoha's children to break. He believed that Itachi had nowhere to go and that he would eventually go on a rant and do something genuinely terrible. He believed that Itachi's death at the hands of a comrade was inevitable. He believed that forcing a child to do something that no adult should have to do was the clan's fault. The worst part was that, aside from one small detail, Shisui was entirely correct. Itachi was no longer a naive boy or an aspirational teenager, even though Shisui may have known him since they were young and served as his mentor. He was more than that. He gave a quiet smile. Itachi. Weasel. His mother had given him a fitting name. Weasels would do whatever it took to live, and Itachi had no intention of doing anything that would kill him. Absolutely not. A few kilometers away from where he was, Kakashi felt a sharp flare of chakra, and he stopped suddenly. The chakra sense was recognizable, but since Konoha shinobi have historically only kept watch at their outposts and the different village gates, nobody should be out here. Unless he was returning from a mission, it was uncommon for anyone to be out here at all. He couldn't be traveling, though, because the other shinobi had been motionless for too long. For a moment, he contemplated in silence whether to continue or to see how the shinobi was doing. His decision was made by the faint sounds of retching, and he quickly drew closer to the other. The ninja lay on the ground, utterly defenseless. However, Kakashi's eyes widened for reasons other than that. Uchiha Itachi was the man on the ground. Before he left, he blinked repeatedly, observing the boy's emotions shift from nausea to frustration to icy rage and burning resolve. He had a duty to the village, and there was nothing he could do for Itachi now. In a matter of seconds, he arrived at the village. He hurried to the Hokage tower, hoping the elderly man was unbound, after the guard merely waved him on at the gates. To the Chunin seated at the mission reporting table, he rattled off, Anbu Operative 824, codename, Wolf, reporting. Request to see Hokage. Sama immediately. She indicated the door with a nod. She answered, you're expected, Anbu.san. He bowed and went into the Hokage's office, taking off his porcelain Anbu mask before bowing once more. Kakashi, you have news? He said. Hi. Before recalling the mission's specifics. The Hokage scowled for a while, lost in contemplation. The Hokage trailed off, realizing that the ninja in question had easily eliminated 2 squads of those very Anbu. A mysterious assailant? From our border? I just reinforced the guard there with 2 Anbu squads. It is inconceivable, he said. Sandame asked, how would you judge his strength level, Kakashi? Kakashi was aware that the true question posed by the Hokage was, are you capable of handling this? He deliberated carefully because he didn't want to make a snap decision when he had a 6-year-old boy who needed to get home. Kakashi replied, he is at least as strong as I am. If it's absolutely necessary, I can do this. Perhaps you are underestimating your own abilities? It is only my own opinion, nothing at all to do with what I can or cannot do, he said. I am aware of my capabilities. I am aware of some of his abilities. But I have no idea what some of those abilities are. The Hokage gave him a quick glance before dismissively nodding. The Hokage was left with his head bent in contemplation and his fingers tangled as Kakashi darted out the window. As Kakashi raced home, racing over the rooftops of Konoha, guilt gnawed at his conscience. Any remaining reservations, however, were washed away by the sight of the boy with the blonde hair waiting for him. At home. He was at home, and someone was waiting, for once. He looked down at the vibrant array of lights that stood out against the sky's rapidly fading light. It was now evening, and Naruto would have returned home by now. The boy's thought, which had kept him going so far, now accelerated his pace. He arrived at his apartment and hurriedly waved to the landlady as he climbed the stairs. Carefully, he opened his door. Kakashi was repeatedly caught in the boy's traps because he didn't need to be careful here, and Naruto loved to pull practical jokes. There was a sigh of relief in the deserted corridor. Not even Naruto, it seems, was so ruthless as to play a practical joke on his Ni.san as soon as he got home. Before anyone could blink, Kakashi entered the house, stuffed his blue cloth mask and his wolf mask into a drawer, and then darted into the bathroom. The stench overcame him, and he held his breath while shedding his Anbu gear. Because the terrain was dotted with streams, field shinobi typically took regular baths. However, Kakashi had been walking for the majority of the last few days, not even stopping to take a bath or rest. He was more in need of a bath than he was of seeing Naruto. He let out a moan as he lowered himself into the bamboo bathtub. In addition to relieving his tense muscles, the hot water was a pleasant contrast to the cool evening air. He let out a satisfied sigh, and awoke to the sight of stars sparkling outside his window and the water growing cold. After getting dressed and getting out of the tub, he stood in his living room and scowled. There was something lacking, like a certain blonde ball of energy. He went from room to room. the furrow on his forehead growing deeper as he arrived at the living room and saw no one else. He had a terrible thought running through his head, and for a moment, dizziness threatened to take over. Maybe it was all a hallucination. A product of his insane mind? Had Naruto really been in his mind? And everything that had transpired? He leaned heavily on the bathroom doorway, holding onto it like a lost child to his savior's arms. Then he caught a glimpse of something orange out of the corner of his eye, and reality hit him. The T-shirt was too small, even for his slender body. Naruto owned it. Additionally, the boy was most likely at Ryuga's house. Kakashi leapt onto the roof of the nearby store and clambered out the window onto the parapet edge of his building. He ran off in the direction of the Uchiha compound. In a matter of seconds, he arrived at the edge of the outskirts and stopped. The Uchiha compound had always been surrounded by an outer gate and another inner gate that led to the residences of the traditionally higher-ranking council members. Recalling the first and only time he had passed through those imposing inner iron gates, he shuddered. However, the outer gate was never locked. Its purpose was more ceremonial than security-related. Thus, it was unexpected to see the rusty iron gates pulled closed. For a moment, Kakashi hung back and melted into the darkness with ease. One figure's silhouette was visible in the dim light inside the hurriedly built temporary outpost. His suspicion that the guard was a Chunin was confirmed by a slight extension of his senses. After closing his eyes and following his chakra sense, he noticed a second, fainter, better, hidden signature. Oh, that must be the Chunin who was watching for any unusual behavior from him. He was certain that his presence was already known, considering the other's skill level and the careless manner in which he had approached. It's just a matter of walking straight up then. As he answered the other shinobi's questions, he strode calmly to the outpost, pretending not to notice the Chunin's agitated appearance. The moment Kakashi's senses wavered, the Chunin moved to open the gate. When he realized who was behind him, a wave of resignation and mild shock passed through him. He swiveled around and bowed his head to greet her. Uchiha-sama. Uchiha Chizu was a tall, regal-looking woman in her middle years, with dark hair that was tightly pulled back in a bun by a pair of finely carved chopsticks and deep blue eyes. She had previously served as his Anbu captain. He had also believed that she detested him. Fortunately, he had advanced to solo missions swiftly and was permitted to remain with them for a considerable amount of time. Hitaki. What is your business here, at this time? He calmly responded, as I told him, I'm here on the Hokage's business. Yes, he was on the Hokage's business, technically. And I am inquiring just what that is. Or rather, who do you need to see? Her commanding tone caused him to raise an eyebrow, but he still complied. Think, who wouldn't she dare ask? His voice was quiet as he said, I am here to see Itachi-san. She suddenly nodded, her eyes widening. She gestured to the Chunin and said, very well, in that case, I shall send Joruna with you. He will make sure you do not take too long. He emphasized, I am on official business, while continuing to stare at her. His half-open, languid black orb met her blue eyes. She nodded, her lips pursed. Take all the time you want then. But he will still act as your guide. We don't want you getting lost, do we? Slowly, he nodded once. You have to save your old Taiko, Itachi. Worry gnawed at Itachi as he looked out the window. He was unable to pinpoint the precise cause of his concern. He simply was. It came naturally. In the last few months, everything has been going so quickly that there is hardly any time left to put His thoughts were interrupted by the knock. He found 2 chakra signatures and scowled. This hour, who was it? And of all places, here. Since Itachi was still considered a minor under clan law, he was legally entitled to live with his parents in the Uchiha family dojo. However, he had always been a recluse. Additionally, he had complained to his father that he shouldn't return home, dripping blood across the tatami mat and frightening Sasuke if he happened to see him. As a result, he had a separate apartment that he used exclusively before and after missions. Naturally, his father was quite happy that his oldest son was participating in so many Anbu missions. He was actually so busy that he had missions going on practically all the time. To put it succinctly, only his parents and the council elders were aware that Itachi had his own apartment. He tried to recall whether he had a meeting at this time by looking at the clock on his wall. The time was 9 p.m. He searched his mind. Itachi.ni. A voice outside said impatiently. A grin pulled at his mouth. That voice could only have come from one blonde chibi. Naruto. Naturally. How was he able to forget? He had promised Ryuga that he would spend the next few days with the boy. In order to free up Ryuga to do some digging, he had already been training the child in the afternoons with Sasuke. Additionally, he had committed to taking Naruto for the next day or so because Kakashi was already 2 days past due and Ryuga couldn't cover his night shift. He walked slowly to the door, grinning as the boy's cries became more and more intense. With a loud bang, he opened the door, clapping a hand around Naruto's mouth and pulling him in while simultaneously managing to wave Ryuga away. With a certain, almost childish, glee, he let the struggling boy down, observing the red cheeks and the angry blue eyes. "Faye, the child ought to try to quit being so entertaining to make fun of. For his own sake as well as Itachi's." "Itachi. The boy whimpered instead, gazing up at him with enormous blue eyes. "What, not a fit this time? That was unexpected." Typically, Itachi could determine a person's entire personality within a few hours of meeting them. However, days after they first met, he was certain of only one aspect of Naruto's character: it was consistently unpredictable. At first glance, it was all too easy to dismiss the boy as a loudmouthed brat. However, Itachi was the master of masks, although Kakashi would dispute this, and when he bent his will to it, he could usually see beneath it. In Naruto's instance, it was evident that the boy was wearing a mask. He was unable to see through it, though. Naruto reminded him of himself and the copy.nin in many ways. He was certainly intrigued by the boy. That, he told himself, was the reason he was becoming so personally involved and unhealthy with the boy. "Haven't I told you not to make so much noise?" Naruto sulked and said, but, at first touch, the glitzy ninjutsu that Ryuga had applied to him vanished, revealing Naruto's actual form in place of Sasuke's likeness. For the heir of the Uchiha clan to be spotted inviting the Kyuubi no Gaki into his house would be completely inappropriate. He snarled, "My neighbors, don't take kindly to small children." Naruto simply spit his tongue at him before collapsing on the ground, complete with a small overnight bag. Itachi gave him a look. Naruto turned around. Itachi tightened his jaw. Why was the damn boy not as susceptible to intimidation as Sasuke? He was still glaring at the child. Ignoring him, Naruto started to open his bag. Itachi observed him with interest. Naruto was doing what? Naruto pulled a pen out. A pencil, too, then an eraser, and lastly, a ruler. The Shinobi Academy Year 2 booklet then appeared, vividly printed in green with the leaf's emblem. He intended to finish his homework. When Itachi saw the textbook, he grimaced. That was the shade of green he had always detested. The boy began writing in it, and he watched. His brow shifted. Being regarded as invisible was not something Uchiha Itachi was accustomed to. He squinted his eyes. "Naruto," he called, his voice sufficiently icy to cause Naruto to turn around. "Nani? I have homework to do. Itachi. I'll play with you later, okay?" Itachi snapped. He snarled, "You little brat," and grabbed the child's textbook. "I do not play with people. I was teaching you the other day." "Teaching?" he replied. He stopped when his chakra sense began to tingle once more. "And besides, you're supposed to go to sleep now, not," he said. "More people coming." He let out a sigh. "Naruto, go down the hall and stay in the last room, and don't make a sound." "What, but," the phrase, "I have visitors," was emphasized. Naruto nodded and swallowed. The eerie eyes of the Uchihas bothered him. Naturally, Sasuke and Itachi were the exceptions. Itachi walked confidently to the door and pushed it open. To conceal the shock that was pulsing through him, he blinked once or twice. There was Kakashi, with one of the Chunin henchmen of the council. The phrase, Uchiha Sama, this shinobi said he's here to see you, carried an underlying question. He was careful to hide his surprise at seeing Kakashi, saying, "Of course. You're late, Hitaki-san." Su-de. When the Chunin remained, Itachi scowled. "Hitaki-san and I have important things to discuss." As always politically correct, the Chunin responded, Concerning that, Uchiha Chizu Sama requested that I follow Hitaki-san. This is, of course, in accordance with the council's latest security rules." Itachi's lips curled. He hadn't bothered to look through the scroll his father had passed him the other day. "Hitaki-san is here on the Hokage's business." The Chunin answered, "Hi. And that's why we let him into the compound after 9. Itachi's thoughts were racing. For a moment, his eyes met Kakashi's. Kakashi had likely come here in search of Ryuga, which is why he was here. Itachi retorted icily, "I am certain, Chunin-san, that I can protect the clan's security better than you." From Itachi to Kakashi, the other shinobi observed the steely looks in their eyes and the strong chakra aura they effortlessly exuded. It appeared that the Chunin was decided by Kakashi's slack hand motion. The man vanished after saying, "Pardon me, Uchiha Sama. I will take my leave." Casually, Kakashi trailed Itachi into the house. He became tense when he heard a slight noise emanating from inside the walls that were covered in chakra. "Nani?" The voice then became clearer and he recognized it, and he suddenly relaxed. "Naruto." His eyes narrowed and he turned to Itachi after grinning. "Why is he here?" The response was, Ryuga-san has a night shift today." Kakashi whispered, "Naruto still doesn't get along with strangers." Itachi's lips merely made a slight movement. He went into the tiny chamber at the rear of the corridor. And was pounced right away. He stumbled for a second, struggling against the small creature that was trying to eat his head, and eventually won. Naruto whimpered, "Itachi.ni," as the Uchiha lifted him by one ankle. "Let me go, apologize, brat, no, yes." Itachi was upset by the response, "No," and shook Naruto again. Okay, stop, please," Itachi asked, still shaking the brat. "What did I ask you to say?" "Well," Itachi shook his head and placed the child on the ground, saying, "Arg. You're a big bully and I'm sorry. Okay, there. Let me down." Wondering when Naruto would realize there was another person in the room, Kakashi simply stood there and watched the scene play out in front of him. As he saw the telltale sign of Naruto starting another of his tirades, he coughed lightly. The blonde went cold. At least his intuition has improved, saw. Just a little. Well, but before he even saw me, I could have cut his throat right where he was. He said the idea out loud. Naruto's eyes went wide as he looked up. His gaze was fixed on Kakashi. Kakashi tried to lighten the mood by asking, "What, no welcome hug for me?" As Itachi's narrowed eyes and Naruto's expressionless gaze forced him to fight the impulse to move from foot to foot. Anbu captains, including former ones, simply did not do that. Naruto stood there, biting his lip. The boy finally said, "You're late," with his head lowered to the ground. Kakashi began, but paused. He wouldn't have thought twice about embracing the boy and telling him that his mission had been difficult and that he had hurried home if they had been home. However, Itachi was now present. Kakashi was still unsure of Itachi's stance. Despite their playful interactions with Naruto, Itachi was fundamentally a shinobi. The most proficient shinobi were so adept at using deceit that it was impossible to suspect them. Itachi was unquestionably the greatest. However, Kakashi was superior. Thus, he was always on guard. Even with tears burning in his eyes, he saw Naruto, his Naruto, moving from foot to foot. It was for the benefit of the boy. If the Uchiha clan or anybody else discovered how deeply he felt for the boy, Naruto would be in even greater danger. He could not allow that to occur. Kakashi thus refused to back down. Even as water droplets started to randomly create a pattern on Itachi's floor, he stayed motionless. He felt the ridiculous urge to wipe those droplets off the floor with a cloth, as if he believed that doing so would undo the harm he had just done and allow him to go back 5 minutes. "I would simply wish Sensei back into existence if I could, or would I? Naruto would be alright if Sensei were still alive. I wouldn't know him, though. We wouldn't have the same level of intimacy as we were." With regret, he told himself. "Let's go back," he said, grabbing the child's arm. Naruto did not answer. He tilted his head in Itachi's direction and said, "I will not interrupt you any longer, Itachi-kun. Thank you." He started to leave, but was stopped by a steely arm on his shoulder. His eyes met twin pairs of spinning Sharingan eyes as he looked up, his eyes widening in surprise. "Thus, I was mistaken. Itachi had been, all along. The boy is staying." He could taste the bitterness of betrayal. A part of him had trusted Itachi in spite of all the caution. There had been a strong desire inside him to trust the other. "Then I get paid in kind for my foolishness." He stiffened, braced for assault. However, Itachi remained motionless. He simply stood there and gave a fierce glare. When the words finally appeared, they were tense and fragmented, blazing with a passion that Uchiha Itachi hardly ever let loose. "You told me you knew what it's like to have a younger brother," they said. Unable to respond, Kakashi stood with his head bowed. Itachi said resolutely, "I'm telling you, you don't," and the implication and contempt in his voice were like a kick to the gut. Kakashi remained motionless. "It's a game. I am unable to break." He said the words again and again. "Hokage. Sama placed Naruto-san in my care. Are you going against his orders?" There was silence. It was the Uchiha's turn to stand with his mouth shut. The anger he had poured into those words released as soon as he spoke them. "The 6. Year-old orphan's soft, tremulous voice, I, pierced the tension between the two shinobi as easily as a knife cutting through butter as it filled the suddenly spacious room. As the sniffling grew louder, he said, I want to stay, keeping his head down on the ground. Itachi bent over. He led the boy to the back room while holding his hand gently. You have homework to do, right? Come on, you can go finish it, and I'll get out a spare futon, he said. As Naruto trailed Itachi, Kakashi's hand spontaneously released the child's arm. They didn't turn around. With a sigh, he took a seat. 5 steps back, 1 step forward. This was how it had been from the beginning. He had to take action to ruin their relationship each time Naruto trusted him. Kakashi wished they could live without limitations for once. Without the shackles that seemed to hold him back at every step, without the constant threat. He sat and gazed blankly at the wall. He was unable to abandon Naruto. Nevertheless, protecting the boy was more than a matter of taste. It was a mission. He was exhausted from the haste to return to the village, and soon after, exhaustion caused his mind to stray down ethereal avenues. Hours later, he had the shocking insight that Naruto had not responded to Itachi's Sharingan activation. Even though there was no sound from the soft footsteps on the floor, Kakashi was awakened by the tiny vibrations they produced. Shinobi were always prepared. Kakashi was reminded more of a man nearing the end of his life than a boy entering adolescence by Itachi, who sat down opposite him and ran a hand over his gray hair. He felt a twinge of guilt at the gesture. This, too, was his fault somehow. They both began, simultaneously, and then fell silent as they withdrew back into their reflective shells. They were both very similar and very different. Finally, I thought you cared for him, Itachi said. Kakashi gazed down at the ground. Everything was a conflict, a game, a war. Nobody did anything or said anything without a hidden agenda. That was the way of the shinobi. However, Uchiha Itachi, the shinobi, would not be seated in front of him, questioning him about a 6-year-old child with whom they had no real connection. The shinobi Uchiha Itachi wouldn't be staring at him with those weary, expressive, yet emotionless eyes. Itachi toyed with the problem, not daring to openly imply when he said, I know what it's like, to realize no one cares. I don't, he shouldn't, not when you said you. It was one thing to feel and to know. It was quite another to say it aloud, though. Many things were odd in the world of a shinobi. Perhaps the most peculiar of all was that a 4-letter word that all people value was the dirtiest to shinobi. Love. It was prohibited. Their sin was that, in the Garden of Eden, they were permitted to observe their fruit but not to touch it or, worse, eat it. Shinobi interacted with the villagers and observed them going about their daily lives in this manner. Observing their love. Observing them in real time, but never having the ability to do so. For so long, Kakashi had been happy with that. However, he could no longer bear to live without life after meeting Naruto. Life is more than a game or a task. Kakashi finally said, he makes you forget, doesn't he? Itachi asked, tilting his head. The mask. I left mine in the drawer once by accident because he was late for school. Took me 2 steps out the door to realize it was gone. He has this way of worming past everything. When the man paused, Itachi turned back to Kakashi, hoping the other would elaborate. Itachi slowly nodded in response to the question, have you ever seen a lake in spring? The water catches the light and throws it right back up, making us see the same light that the sun provides every day in a totally different way. Naruto, he is the same. Then why, I forgot for a while, but when he wasn't around, I remembered. Itachi somehow grasped the significance of those words. He was well aware of how simple it was to revert to the role of puppet to the village. They had received training in the Anbu to be tools. It was all too simple to live their lives in a robotic manner, treating everything and everything as if it were a mission, even when they weren't on one. That was the reason no one lingered in the Anbu for very long. Itachi didn't trust himself around his younger brother, which is why he needed this apartment. Those words, you scared him, cut deep into Kakashi's soul even though they contained no accusations. The exhausted ninja simply acknowledged with a nod. He made a mistake, it was always his fault. Itachi got up and said, I have a spare futon in the back. He could see that Kakashi was exhausted and most definitely not in the mood to talk about anything. At last, Kakashi whispered. He didn't react. Itachi spun around, trying desperately to decipher the mysterious words. The words, to your activated Sharingan. He didn't respond at all, caused Itachi to become confused. Their primary motivation for looking into the Uchiha clan was Naruto's intense reaction to Kakashi's Sharingan. However, Why had Shisui been sent to caution Naruto against looking into the connection if it hadn't been the Uchiha who had attacked him? All of a sudden, much more was happening than either of them had anticipated. As the clan elders repeated the plan, Shisui gave the older shinobi an absent-minded nod. All of this was known to Shisui, who most likely understood the plan better than the elderly fool in front of him. He had no trouble controlling the rage that was building inside of him. He would pay attention. Due to tradition, obligation, and loyalty to his clan, he would always pay attention. He gave another nod. The Kyuubi no Gaki is a threat to the village. Hokage Sama is clearly under the demon's influence somehow. It is up to the Uchiha to protect the village, the elderly man said. As has always been our duty. The Hokage governs, but it is we who protect. It is the Uchiha's role to serve justice, another replied. Shisui forced herself not to snort. The elders were undoubtedly out of touch with reality after spending too much time in the council and away from the battlefield, which further sunk them into the self-delusion that most Uchiha were trapped in. A strange genetic accident brought on by their ancestors' constant manipulation of the fundamental building blocks of life due to the intense Uchiha desire to become stronger. They were just that. As a child, he had heard the whispers. Desecration. Crazy, as though they were superior. We have to incapacitate Hitaki Kakashi first, then we get the boy. Hitaki is too loyal a guard dog. The pun made everyone laugh. They had always thought of Hitakis as dogs. Naturally, though, nobody asked why a Hitaki had been the only shinobi to match the Sannin in skill. The Sannin was never mentioned by any Uchiha. To leave unattended, Fugaku Sama went on without incident. At least the clan head made an effort to come across as above petty behavior. Feeling the heat of Fugaku's glare, Shisui muttered, and then there is the matter of Ryuga and Itachi. He was aware that the clan head was adamant about keeping his nephew and successor out of this, but there was now unquestionable evidence that Itachi was at least connected to the situation. Fugaku roared, Itachi and Ryuga haven't been spotted with the child in 2 weeks. No, but Hitaki entered the compound last night to visit Itachi. He left that morning with a significantly smaller companion. Itachi is guilty of harboring the child within our very compound, Shizu told the clan head. Knowing that he was going too far, Shisui added, if I may be so bold elders, perhaps Shizu Sama would be more suited to deal with the Hitaki, while I handle Itachi. He was not here to make recommendations, but only to serve as a tool, to be prepared to execute the council's will. However, Itachi posed a threat and would not let Fugaku continue to hide it. Finally, the boy had teetered over the thin line that separates outright mutiny from teenage rebellion. He would pose a physical threat to the clan if he continued. Indeed, he may already be too powerful for him or any of them to manage. Fugaku spat angrily, Itachi is this clan's future successor. There was a commotion among the elders. Shizu calmly responded, Itachi, as I see it, Fugaku Sama is no longer obedient to the clan. Fugaku's face tensed, then relaxed as he came to terms with his child's shortcomings. Shisui grinned to himself. Brat, your father is no longer able to keep you safe. Fugaku tried to reason with the elders, trying to get one of their attention, saying, there is still no concrete proof. In this one instant, he was a man with a son rather than a clan head. Another elder demanded, then prove he is still loyal within the next 15 days. The others gave a nod of agreement. Shisui surreptitiously studied the clan head. Despite Fugaku's recent 40th birthday, he appeared far too elderly. That usually happens when you feel bad about allowing your clan to pervert your oldest child and exclude your deceased brother's only son. There was no sympathy Shisui felt for the older man, absolutely not. Shizu Sama ordered, Shisui, on the 15th day. You know what to do. Spare him no mercy. After the elders had scattered, Shisui's head tilted. Itachi had never been able to surpass his mentor despite his precociousness. I still possess that jutsu, Sa. At the implication of the slight, he drew lead. Mercy is something I never have. For anyone, Shizu Sama. No, in that aspect you and Itachi are all too similar, but there was always talk of how close you were to the boy. The words, duty comes first, Shizu. Same, duty above everything else, were exactly what she wanted to hear. Of course. 15 days from now then. The council will take care of the aftermath, so don't take any liberties. We will need you for other things, she replied softly. He gave a nod and hurried off. Stupid people. Itachi will only realize that the clan is against him if Fugaku is given enough time to question him. If I take action, I have to do it before the deadline. Ultimately, the clan will have much more to prepare for than the Kyuubi's annihilation in 15 days. As he flew across the rooftops, the cliff with the statues of the Hokage swept past. Your time is up, old man. Although he didn't always follow instructions, Shunshin no Shisui did listen. Uchiha Fugaku gestured for his son to come nearer. Sasuke merely gave him a disobedient glance. His father wanted to speak with him, so his mother had forbidden him from attending a training session with Naruto and the Ishida brothers. Sasuke believed that his father never spoke to him. The untalented second son whose presence was unnecessary because of his brilliant older brother was undoubtedly nothing more than a disappointment to his father. The clan head believed that he only required one successor, and Sasuke was not that one. He persuaded the boy, saying, "Come, Sasuke. I will never be able to teach you this jutsu if you do not pay close attention. I'm going to learn jutsu from him." For a brief moment, he was overcome with joy as he followed his father to the lake on the edge of the Uchiha training ground. In his 7 years of life, his father had never shown any interest in him or his training, so it was mind-blowing to see him learn a jutsu, especially Kaden Gukakyu no Jutsu, which was one of the clan's trademarks. After all, why should his father teach him when he was so busy and Itachi already existed? Itachi.ni. Had something happened to Itachi? He hadn't seen his Aniki for a while, and he suddenly stopped practicing the hand movements. "Sasuke? You're nearly there," his father was attempting to reassure him. False. False. Is Itachi.ni alright? Even Sasuke's untrained eyes could not fully comprehend the moment of emotion that flashed across Uchiha Fugaku's face. Fugaku was taken aback by his younger son's depth of perception. When did he become an adult? Sasuke had always been the baby to Fugaku, the naive, innocent child Makoto spoiled and whom he had to watch out for, but the boy could still precisely identify the reason why his father was suddenly interested in him. Sasuke was now the only candidate to succeed Itachi as head of the Uchiha clan council. Fugaku calmed himself. The boy's impression was not to be disturbed, on the contrary, it was a good sign for his future. "If you can, learn the jutsu," he said curtly. "I will only show it to you once more." Kaden Jutsu no Gukakyu. After that, he turned and left, preferring to observe the boy from a distance because he knew that being close to him would divert the boy and cause him to rely on him for support and approval, and such feeble feelings should not be fostered. Training Sasuke would be no different from training Itachi because both of them were quick learners, just like he had been. Fugaku concealed a thin smile behind a facade of gruff approval when Sasuke, who was even faster than Itachi, approached him a few hours later, smelling of soot and with determination burning in his normally calm black eyes. Fugaku wondered if the boy would fall faster than his brother had, because he would undoubtedly rise higher. Sasuke tackled the smaller twin, smiling as his quick punches and kicks kept up with the older student. There, an opening, he moved quickly, relying on Naruto to cover his back and follow his lead as he scrambled around in the sand, wrestling the larger twin into the ground. The twins seized both children and twisted their arms behind their backs, taunting one of them, "You never stood a chance," and Sasuke snorted angrily as his foot slashed out and struck a shoulder, but the yelp from behind sent a jolt through his back. Confused, he muttered, "It's not my fault I have an idiot for a partner," as the words came out. "Oh no, I'm not a moron. Let me go, please." "Yeah," Sasuke shot back, "but you're the one who tripped partner. The opening wasn't taken by me. Who is the fool?" Sasuke scowled. He had been the one lured into taking the opportunity, and his shoulders drooped as Naruto threw back his grin, triumphant. As they let go of the pair, the twins simply laughed and said, "Well, we have to go home. I'll see you all tomorrow." Sasuke frowned. It wasn't the Uchiha way to have fun, but he had fun with Aniki in the past, didn't he? But last night, father, the hopeful note in the younger Ishida's voice made him smile a little. He enjoyed the playful sparring and the unofficial friendship that had developed between the four of them. "No tomorrow, we have tasks to complete. Didn't Ryuga-san promise us a training session?" Naruto turned to Sasuke, catching the tail end of a frown disappearing behind the cold mask Sasuke liked to retreat behind. "Sasuke? Well, oh, yes," he said, nodding his head. "I apologize, guys." As they drove off, he waved them away. Naruto took a moment to examine his friend, who appeared worn out, exhausted, and grim, almost unlike the Sasuke he was familiar with. The black-haired boy fidgeted under the scrutiny. "What are you looking at?" The acerbic tone caused Naruto to quickly turn away. Naruto was at a loss for words, so he cocked his head and smiled as a plan came to him. It wouldn't solve Sasuke's problems because that required words, which Naruto couldn't find, but it would take the chill off the air. How about we give Ryuga a surprise? For the time being, that worked for Naruto, who was living with the Chunin after Kakashi disappeared once more. He wasn't prepared to handle the harsh words of his guardian and the fear they had caused, nor was he prepared to make sense of them in light of the memory of soft hands running through his hair and the softly whispered farewell. Father had been training him for the past few nights, and the punishing pace was wearing him out. Sasuke recognized that tone, which meant Naruto was plotting again, which usually led to mayhem and screaming adults, neither of which he welcomed at the moment. A romp would lift both of their spirits. Sasuke sighed as he nodded reluctantly, but Naruto's distant expression told him something was amiss, and whatever it took to annoy his irrepressible friend must have been ground-shattering. Uchiha Sasuke had little to fear in Konoha, but Uzumaki Naruto, Sasuke had long known that many people did not like his friend, had warned Sasuke to keep his friendship with Naruto hidden from their parents. If he had been thinking clearly, he would have objected to the plan. Naruto wanted to leave the school and head for Ryuga's apartment, which was located far from Konoha's center, just outside the Uchiha compound. However, he was still 7 years old and exhausted, and Sasuke would spend the next week blaming himself for it. With his teeth bared in the simulacrum of a smile, the Junin easily navigated the apartment complex's wards. The plan was straightforward. Dismantle the unit's defenses, connect the wards to the jutsu he had prepared, and then wait for his prey to become incapacitated. He would then only need to return and retrieve it for Chizu-sama. The memories of being bound, of having those bastard clap handcuffs around his wrists, made Uchiha Ryuga lick his scarred lips, realizing that his days were numbered. Ryuga owed him 501. He easily climbed the complex's sides. There were no shinobi around at this time of day, and the complex was too remote and dilapidated to be housing more than the typical Chunin or Genin, who would not be able to match the genjutsu he had cast. Nevertheless, he used as little chakra as possible, swinging up to the 5th level by hand, which was the corner unit, the smallest and least expensive. After stepping on the pipes and quickly running through the seals, boar, ram, tiger, ram, he released the jutsu and let it spread throughout the window. His eyes widened as chakra flared, and he cursed. Although the jutsu was high level, it had somehow activated the defense mechanisms. He used his Sharingan eyes to trace the intricate web of chakra that lay beneath the expected defenses, so tightly hidden that even his Tomo Sharingan had to strain to detect its operations. The seals inserted into the ward were too complicated, many of which were unknown to Chunin himself. Anbu. Did Ryuga have the Hokage's support in any way? Knowing that whoever had set up the trap might already be on their way here, he leapt away as his mind raced. Chizu was not going to be happy, but he couldn't help smiling as an explosion shook the side of Ryuga's building, the heat burning him as he ran away too slowly. Kakashi, who had been observing the Uchiha clan's movements, tensed abruptly. A trap had been set. Ryuga's apartment. He was staying with the Chunin while he and Itachi watched the Uchiha, and he was terrified for Naruto's safety. The older man leapt through the forest undergrowth, racing towards Ryuga's apartment, and Itachi, who had assisted Kakashi in setting those wards, tensed as well. Only one was triggered, he said. Kakashi nodded, but the rage and fear in his veins would not stop. He knew that Naruto was in danger, but caution and reason fought against his fear. Shinobi Rule 25. Caution ordered him to keep Itachi behind in order to gather hard proof for their mounting suspicions about the Uchiha clan. He was weakened by fear for Naruto. Logic prevailed, and he told the other, "We should split up," ignoring the fact that they were only a few minutes away from arriving at the apartment. "Sasuke's probably with them," Itachi said, shaking his head. Since the Hitaki were dog summoners and understood what pack meant, Kakashi couldn't argue with that. Beside him, Naruto shuddered, and then they climbed the final staircase to the 5th floor. Naruto. Why was his friend so terrified? Sasuke asked. Sasuke was the hand on his shoulder, and he was 7 years old, he wasn't 5. Itachi claimed that Naruto was 7 years old, that he was not alone, and that he knew how to throw shuriken. The malice vanished, and Sasuke was left to steady him. Sasuke heard, not felt, something snap as he landed on his side, pain shooting through him as a blast shook the building and knocked them down the stairs. Naruto. He thrashed for a moment before he saw the Uchiha fan sewn into the sleeve holding him. Military police. Clan. They were safe. Sasuke looked around in panic before realizing the boy was next to him, unconscious. A few seconds later, he heard voices around him and saw arms picking them up. Later, he would regret unwinding. Before he awoke in the hospital bed with his mother's distressed face looming over him, Sasuke's last memory was the red swirl of the Sharingan. "My pal?" As she gave him a hug, he croaked at her. "My pal? Sasuke? There was an explosion and you were by yourself. After school you went to see Ryuga. Do you recall?" No, there was no friend Sasuke." When he heard his father's voice, he looked at him and realized that father was lying, just as he had known Itachi. Was in danger and that his friend had been with him. "The Uchiha have no friends, Sasuke." As father turned and walked away, his mother, who Sasuke knew was grieving over more than just his wounds, merely sobbed into his shoulder. At least neither Ryuga nor the boys had been inside the apartment, and Kakashi was crouching in the corner, checking his seals. The genjutsu that was all over the building was cloying, and a glance at Itachi confirmed his suspicions that it was used by a Sharingan user. Itachi narrowed his eyes as chakra signatures flared near them, and Kakashi, slightly less sensitive to the whirl of a Sharingan being used near him, caught it a moment later. They slipped closer, and Kakashi froze as the unidentified signatures sped away, carrying two very different bundles. Surprised to find Itachi with him, he started after the one with the blonde. "They won't hurt him," Itachi said, his lips pressed into a thin line. The illusions enveloping them vanished as the duo carrying the boy finally stopped, veering around the Uchiha complex and heading for the edge of the hidden village. Itachi stiffened once more, knowing where they were going and that chakra signature. When Itachi said, "We have to stop them before they cross the border," he doubled his pace. His cage Bunshin caught Naruto and sped away to a relatively safe distance, but Kakashi nodded and accelerated, his fingers slipping through Shunshin to allow him to cut the clones off, grabbing the hands of the one holding Naruto and forcing the other back into Itachi's Kaden Jutsu. It was not good that these clones had so much chakra, Kakashi said as the clone grinned and produced a Kaden Jutsu that was on par with Itachi's, easily driving the smaller man back. None of them could survive a fatal blow, clone or not. Rakery. At the last second, the clone he was aiming for veered, sending his arm through its leg instead, sending Kakashi crashing into a tree branch. Rakery. Once more, it ducked, his blow only removing an arm. Itachi, who appeared almost accustomed to its strategies as he countered blow after blow, was having an easier time, removing another Kaden before slamming the clone to the ground. When Kakashi attempted another Rakery, he was able to dispel his clone before collapsing to the ground, gasping for air. There was something so familiar about that chakra signature. When one of the clone's kicks struck, Itachi flinched and was pushed headfirst into a tree. It then leapt away and went for Kakashi's cage Bunshin, but was bludgeoned out of existence by one of Kakashi's nin dogs, which fell to the ground and whimpered at its master as he doubled over from exhaustion, barely remembering to slide his Hite-8 down as his Bunshin brought Naruto to the ground. He shuddered at the thought as he lifted Naruto from the Bunshin's arms, staggering as he dispelled it and the boy's full weight dropped on him. Itachi arrived in time, stabilizing Kakashi. 3 Rakiras. What kind of clone took 3 assassination jutsus to dissipate? The chakra reminded Kakashi of the blood-soaked glade and rotting Anbu corpses he had found at the border of Konoha. Itachi had somehow known about the clone. Kakashi bridled. Slowly, Itachi removed his hands. It always came down to this. They were both men who were difficult to trust, who avoided emotional ties, and who favored the name shinobi who always looked beneath the surface. With Naruto lying in Kakashi's arms, suddenly appearing much smaller than his 7 years, a bruise forming across his forehead, and the horrifying knowledge of who exactly had nearly gotten his hands on the boy, Itachi was unable to provide Kakashi with an explanation. "How are you certain they didn't acquire Sasuke?" Finally, Kakashi rasped. They were not identical. Even as the betrayal ripped through his veins, he forced himself to say, the ones holding Sasuke were F.A. Fugaku's underlings. Did the clan head know who the clones belonged to? Was he even aware? "Do we need to travel to the medical facility?" Itachi inquired, and Kakashi pointed to the lightening bruise while giving a sharp shake of his head. "The Kyuubi heals," Kakashi uttered, snorting gently at the irony of the statement. What was left unsaid was that the village and the hospital staff were unreliable. Cloaked in genjutsu to keep prying eyes at bay, they traveled in silence to Kakashi's apartment. Itachi stood after tending to his minor wounds, glaring at the older man's gray pallor. "You should stay here," Kakashi whispered, "because it's unsafe." Itachi said, "I have to see if Sasuke's safe," and then he disappeared out the door. Neither was interested in discussing the clones. "Itachi!" His mother yelled as he entered the hospital ward, and he gave her a curt nod. She made no attempt to embrace him, but Itachi didn't mind. Instead, his gaze was fixed on the small figure sleeping beneath the hospital sheets. What took place? I'm not sure. After school, Sasuke went to see Ryuga. These days, he's been doing that a lot. There was an explosion. Someone set Ryuga's wards off. I'm to blame. She turned her head away, but I knew Fugaku wouldn't approve. But did you ever care so much for me, mother? Did you ever try to stop? You wanted Sasuke to have someone else love him, to have someone else be to him what father cannot. It was useless now, he said, and Sasuke had always been the second son, the infant who needed to be pampered, out of Fugaku's sight. Itachi had previously met the anxious Chunin outside the ward and assured him that Naruto was safe, so the statement, "they didn't let Ryuga in," was not a question. It was sometimes easy to forget that Uchiha Mikoto had been a Kunyachi, one good enough to have activated her Sharingan, survived the wars, and escaped the Kyuubi attack. Mikoto's expression hardened. "You know how it is," he said, a faint smile appearing on his lips as the steel threaded through his mother's tones. "How badly hurt is he?" "Only the ribs. A hairline break." His mother lost her temper once more and muttered, "And those cuts. Additionally, I believe he has a concussion. I'm not sure how the medics missed it. He can't recall the boy's name or face, but he keeps mentioning a friend and requesting to see him. He probably didn't have any friends." The words poured out, the last two so softly that Itachi had to strain to hear them. "He's always been a quiet boy, like you." "Naruto, friend? He can't recall. Is there no bruise? Did the medical staff not notice any swelling?" When he asked his mother questions, she simply shook her head. "Bastards." Using the Sharingan on the clan head 7-year-old, Itachi muttered. He intended to murder each of them individually. His mother looked at him sharply from the side, as if she had heard his murderous thoughts. Itachi? Since Itachi was the heir, Mikoto allowed Fugaku to have Itachi in exchange for Sasuke, even though she knew her boy wasn't a child and she was aware of the punishments he must have received for his actions. However, she had always dismissed Itachi's lack of interest as eccentric. She had never considered the rumors of his adventures to be true, believing them to be exaggerations intended to enhance the clan's image. She was aware of the almost smiles that Sasuke was able to extract from Itachi, but she still saw how Itachi's eyes swept over his brother's motionless body, how he raised a hand forward and hesitated, aware of her. It hurt her suddenly, how easily she had let him go, how little she had resisted the clan, how obliging and accepting she had been of it all, and, worst of all, how proud she had been to create a shinobi who gave Konoha everything he had to protect him. "I'll be back in a while," she said as she turned to face the doorway. Itachi waited until his mother had gone before placing his fingertips on Sasuke's forehead and activating his Sharingan, indicating that someone had been tampering. If he knew his mother was crying, he didn't say anything. Naruto. Return that. They were supposed to be searching for him, but Sasuke chased the blonde while Itachi laughed from his tree perch. Unfortunately, finders, keepers, Sasuke lunged low and hard, laughing as he knocked the blonde into the muddy ground, causing him to lose his hold on the lunchbox he had stolen, while Naruto laughed as he ran up the slope. "Hey, I understand. Idiot, you ought to have simply asked me to share rather than..." Sasuke turned to face the motionless lump sprawled on the floor. The blonde brat was tricking Sasuke, and Itachi narrowed his eyes high in the trees, then relaxed. "Naruto?" As he approached, still wary, Sasuke could hear the worry in his brother's voice. He was well aware of Naruto's propensity for deceit. "Naruto?" Sasuke poked the other, squatting to check for a pulse despite the fact that fear tightened his chest and caused his voice to squeak. This was serious. "Oh no!" Sasuke screamed as the lunchbox was taken away from him and he was thrown to the ground. "Hey, now who's laughing?" Before realizing that Sasuke was trying to play dead, Naruto stuck his tongue out and said, "Oh come on Sasuke, don't be a copy." Sasuke's eyes were wide open and focused solely on Naruto, who wrinkled his nose before leaping onto the ground in his prone form and digging his fingers into Sasuke's sides. "Naruto. Hold on, oh no." Sasuke's laughter was punctuated by exclamations, and they eventually fell to the shallow stream on their right in a tangle of muddy, blonde, black, and giggling boys. When Sasuke finally muttered, "It's not funny, you know," his chest heaving with every breath. "I apologize." Softly, Naruto said the word. Sasuke snarled, "Besides, you're supposed to include me in all your pranks as my best friend." "Yes, I did. I pranked you," the blonde yelled loudly, causing Sasuke to groan and extend a hand to strike him. Naruto smiled mischievously. "Hey, What a fool. Before they started again, Itachi chose to descend upon them. You were supposed to be looking for me, he said, glaring at the two of them. Do you have the same thoughts as me? Yes. They both leapt at him, and Itachi was so taken aback that he nearly failed to dodge, leaving a line of mud streaked across his chest. Brats. Unaware of what they had taken from Sasuke, the memory fingers ached with bloodlust. However, despite powerful genjutsu confusing his memory, Sasuke continued to hold onto some part of Naruto, which was a testament to the friendship and bloodline. Subterfuge was officially no longer an issue, so Itachi held off on restoring the boy's memory for a moment before retracting his hands in response to footsteps in the hallway. Father. Itachi, the greeting said flatly, without the pride that Itachi had once insisted on. As Fugaku's son and heir, Itachi had always been exempt from the rigid decorum required in conversations with the clan head, so when he heard the cool words, Uchiha Sama, he flinched and something inside of him laughed with delight. I am aware of your plotting techniques, the identity of the person who attempted Ryuga's murder, and your intentions regarding Uzumaki Naruto. Finally, Fugaku snarled, I told you the dangers of encouraging the boy's attachment to Ryuga. Itachi glared at the older man. I never thought Uchiha would ever be in danger because of their association with another Uchiha. I made a mistake. Ryuga isn't, you know, Fugaku interrupted himself, exasperated. He was the son of your brother. The slight tone of disdain he added to his voice was merely a show, but the feelings behind it were genuine. I thought we weren't the Hyugas. The Uchiha had never been divided and had always been governed by a single leader. He still cared, because Itachi saw the glimmer of regret that crossed the clan head's face as he flinched once more. It's interesting. I wonder if he and his uncle were bound by the same unbreakable bonds. I wonder if father feels bad about his brother's fate. I wonder if he feels the same obligation I do to Sasuke. The silent statement, I wonder if you would say the same if uncle was alive, was enough to make Fugaku snap. Do you believe I'm ignorant? With the Hitaki, how do you sneak around? In what way do you persuade your brother to meet the demon? Itachi, you don't understand, the man finally said as Fugaku stepped forward and stood next to Itachi, who was staring at the prone figure on the bed. You know what? The vessel, not the demon, is Uzumaki. What could possibly convince you to believe Konoha's greatest secret about that historical artifact, Uchiha Sama? Father, I know far more than you could ever guess. Fugaku flinched. Itachi was unsatisfied this time. How are you? The older man looked away after swallowing, saying, we need to tidy up after ourselves. The clan, Itachi, is in danger because of the Uzumaki. How about Konoha? Does the village benefit from collusion with such? Itachi demanded, attempting to coerce the other into making an admission despite his deep-seated disgust. However, Fugaku had already turned away, resuming his icy demeanor. The village is sufficiently protected as it is. Sharingan, Itachi said, erasing the memory of their final moments together as father and son. It would not be good for the man to recall his admission. With his father sitting by Sasuke's side, Itachi crept out of the ward. He knew that something needed to be done quickly because the clan, under Fugaku's influence, was no longer even loyal to Konoha. Ryuga ran across the rooftops of the village toward the Hokage's tower, but someone was coming for him. Itachi reduced his speed so that his cousin could get to him. Where? The Hokage. Itachi said, the clan plans to mutiny, which made him move faster. What's new, then? The quip didn't go down well. Itachi, you have no proof, Ryuga said in a desperate attempt to dissuade him. Itachi trailed off, I heard him. Itachi's father had only hinted at the fact that his word would not be sufficient for the council, which was why he and Kakashi had danced around the subject of Naruto's attacker for so long, forced to gradually unearth tidbits of information rather than conducting a direct investigation into the clan's involvement. In Konoha, the Uchiha were too strong. As the tower came into view, he veered and quickly changed course, going in the direction of Kakashi's apartment instead. A rare display of frustration broke through Kakashi's expressionless exterior as he bit his lips. To think they would turn, he whispered to himself quietly as Itachi shared his findings. Pull yourself together, Itachi. I need to do something, he growled, unable to control the panic coursing through his body. I feel like a genin thrown into my first battle situation. He stiffened and Ryuga held him back, saying, I need to do something. Simply put, you aren't thinking, Kakashi said. They might murder your ward, they might begin. However, why would they? The numbers don't add up. The Uchiha are well off and liked, strong. And arrogant, Ryuga said softly, and Itachi closed his eyes for a second. He had to be honest with them if he wanted their advice, and he wasn't the type to ask for advice from others or value it. As a child, he had always outstripped his teachers and soon learned to ignore them. Even his father couldn't compete with him. This, however, is not about me. Rather, it is about the village, Konoha, and Sasuke. The Kyuubi. The Sharingan can control it, he said flatly, and he felt his former captain's aura spike with a rage so fierce he knew the other understood the statement. His face was filled with astonishment, shock, and then comprehension and horror in varying degrees. There had been no accident with the Kyuubi. How are you aware? Finally, Ryuga said, and Itachi closed his eyes. They were too good to be deceived, and since Ryuga had been one of the rising stars of the police force and Kakashi-san could detect lies as well as an Inuzuka, he had to tell them the truth. A truth he had long withheld from all other living things. I can help you, Itachi said, turning abruptly as the speaker's evil radiance made him realize that nobody should be here and that no one had unlocked the clan shrine's door in years. It was supposed to be impossible for anyone to ambush Uchiha Itachi. Inhaling the sight of the battered, looking shinobi, Itachi nearly sneered. The long black hair, the coal black eyes that were the unmistakable hallmark of Uchiha, the waves of malice that buffeted him. It was impossible, in fact. He approached me, Itachi said softly, his eyes blank. Uchiha Madara. Kakashi stiffened, and Ryuga's eyes widened in amusement. How? Somehow he's cheated death. Are you certain that it is him? Itachi was the focus of Kakashi's attention. No, I've thought about that, Itachi said, shaking his head. His actions would be unknown to any genetic duplicate. Ryuga began to falter. Why didn't you tell? The council of the village? The clan? Who among them would have taken me seriously? Anbu. Itachi did not flinch when Kakashi said, your superiors, in a chilly tone. He desires the village. Itachi wasn't entirely sure why he was explaining this or why he wanted Kakashi to agree with him and tell him that he had been correct. Leading the Anbu to him would have led them to their slaughter and decimated the village's defenses, he said. Kakashi's eyes narrowed as he said, so you let a threat creep around our borders unhindered, sensing that this was not the end of the story. I was learning from him. I wanted to learn, Itachi said, but I was distracting him. You desired to deal with him directly. Why did you not bring this to the Hokage, Itachi? Itachi turned away. We wouldn't have been able to stand against him, she said. You would have, too. Why? Because he was a problem for the Uchiha? Ryuga cut him with his scorn. Due to the fact that he would have provoked a civil war. We would have had to battle our own if he had turned the village against itself. Then he would have brought our adversaries to destroy us, Itachi yelled at his relative. What makes an old ancestor rise from the grave to demolish the village? Kakashi said, revenge, and Itachi gave a stern nod. Then he left, more than a year ago. I hoped I could stop him, he said softly, his words tinged with failure. When he realized that I wouldn't, he must have gone to Fugaku. He just got back. To Itachi's surprise, Kakashi stated, came through the border a couple of weeks ago. Dispatched 2 squads of Anbu and buried them with brutal efficiency. Itachi froze, wondering if Madara had been testing him by watching him play with Sasuke and Naruto and gradually opening his heart to his exiled cousin and his former captain. Madara's departure had lulled him into a false sense of security. All at once, everything fell into place. He used us, Itachi said, feeling hopeless and on the verge of drowning. Itachi. Kakashi let out a bark. He stoked suspicions about the clan by using us. He turned the clan against the village and fueled their paranoia with our investigation. Itachi came to the terrifying conclusion that the Hokage's hand would have been forced with Naruto gone. But the clan was already planning to mutiny. Ryuga sighed. You told me that on the rooftops. Madara couldn't have foreseen which side would win, taking the clan by surprise. Why do you think he's only interested in the Uchiha? The Hokage needs to hear this, Kakashi interrupted, raising a hand as Itachi was about to respond. Everything. Itachi attempted to object, saying, the village council. Contrary to popular belief, they don't know everything or make all the decisions. Trust Sandaime. Sama a little, Kakashi said abruptly. The unconscious boy before him was examined by the Hokage. The third muttered, the seal has been tempered with. That must have been his motive for ambushing you, while attempting to undo the harm. His icy eyes shifted to the 2 young shinobi in front of him. You should have come to me sooner, before such a thing happened, he said. Uchiha Itachi and Hitaki Kakashi. These were 2 of the Leaf's most talented and deadly shinobi in a long time. They both looked at him coolly. Sarutobi let out a sigh. Youth was reckless and inexperienced, and sometimes he forgot how young they were. Being young and intelligent meant that you were positive that creativity and intuition were superior to experience. Many great shinobi had fallen because of that very sentiment. Orochimaru. He was still plagued by the name. However, this had nothing to do with his shortcomings as a Hokage or a teacher. This had nothing to do with the perils of self-confidence. Once again, it was about the frail creature lying still on the bed. Kakashi did not have to recoil when he said, "I gave him to you to protect," as Itachi and Sarutobi could hear him swallow out of habit. "Jiraiya is in the vicinity. You must track him down as soon as possible. Take the boy with you and keep him safe." The third hesitated for a long time before giving the order, saying, "I cannot reverse all the damage." He had to have faith that Hitaki Kakashi would fulfill his wishes because too much had already been said in front of the Uchiha. He gave Kakashi a piece of fabric that had been ripped from one of Jiraiya's cloaks. The edges were neat and clean, deliberately torn out by a kunai. It was his best option. With the cloth in hand, the Junin promptly dispatched his summons. When the older of the two asked, "And what will become of the Uchiha?" Sarutobi was almost taken aback. Young people's paths are unpredictable, even for experienced individuals. "The village is not as ignorant as you had feared. Leave," he ordered, his words tinged with impatience. "The Uchiha will be dealt with." Kakashi lifted Naruto and bowed rigidly before sweeping out of the chambers. He had received his orders from the Hokage. Itachi pushed aside the emotions that were threatening to overwhelm him. It was illogical to believe that he and the Hitaki were in any way obligated to one another. The Hokage handed him a scroll and said, "Itachi. There is only one option." Itachi paused, reaching out. "What about him?" "Leave that to me. You and Kakashi were right to bring the matter to my attention." As his gaze swept over the scroll, he became acutely aware that his Anbu mask was missing. Even though he knew how to conceal his features on his own, there was always a chance that a face or physical aspect of him would turn on him. He had been thinking about this order for a long time. Red splattered everything, weighing down the soft fabric he wore under Anbu issue armor, and he had turned it over and over in his mind until he could feel it. He had come to that conclusion on his own, weeks earlier, and brushed it aside. Was sanctioned murder truly that different from vigilantism, and now to be told to do this? But what did this have to do with the murders he had already committed? In Konoha's name, he had already claimed innumerable lives. He had vowed to keep the peace and guard the leaf. The question slipped out, all? Such a fate was not deserved by Sasuke and Ryuga. And could Mikoto really? "That is what the council has decided," said the Hokage without turning around. "How can you make me do this?" The answer to that he already knew. The only Sharingan user still faithful to the village, he was a shinobi. "Itachi, use your discretion," the Hokage said, still standing in front of the window with his head bowed. For once, the serene face of village life as seen from the Hokage tower would bring neither of them any solace. Emotion dulls the senses and distorts the mind. As a result, neither of them saw Shunshin no Shisui's faint footsteps as he fled into the sky, abandoning his plans to kill Hitaki Kakashi. "It was foolish of Fugaku to postpone your demise. Dearest cousin, we'll see who gets to play executor." Itachi ducked into the darkness. He only breathed when he had to, forcing his heart to slow. At this early stage, he did not want to run the risk of being discovered. As it happened, he quickly dashed into the compound, counting down the seconds until the guard changed. He was happy that the knowledge he had gained as a result of a deranged, immature desire to prove himself was now being applied in a more positive way. From there, getting into the compound and going to the most luxurious house was almost comically simple. He was familiar with every path leading to the clan head's home, every way to sneak in undetected and sneak out again, always inconspicuous and always out of sight. For the general Uchiha people to see the clan heir covered in blood and his hands smeared with dirt would not have been fitting. Finally, he reached his destination and stood over the boy's bed, looking composed. There was really only one option, and the Hokage had been correct. Itachi thought that they were too dissimilar to be brothers. Despite this, their fates were similar because they were both sons of Uchiha Fugaku, and they were already written in the swirl of the Sharingan before they were even born. Sasuke would be the heir if Itachi turned around and departed right away. The clan would benefit from his fervent personality, which contrasts so sharply with Itachi's icy determination. Itachi was confident that the clan would be able to shape Sasuke given enough time and motivation. The boy was also sentimental. He couldn't allow that to occur. He refused to allow the clan to use Sasuke as a weapon. What about Konoha? Shutting his eyes, Itachi called forth the Sharingan. No harm would come to his mother. He knew Makoto loved the leaf despite her bravado and devotion to her husband. She had once told him, when he was just a little bit larger than Sasuke, if you have to kill, do it for the village, Itachi. Fight for it and everything good in it. He pushed the memory away, allowing himself to become icy in the face of what needed to be done. The man who took away her husband and son would not be liked by her. Shisui's arrival was signaled by a swirl of smoke. His drawl was lazy. Itachi, what a surprise, he said. Shisui, why are you here? Why not? Itachi gave him a fierce look. He could already feel the activated Sharingan draining his chakra. However, with Sasuke on the bed between them and Shisui so close. Shisui grinned and said, I was actually waiting for you. Expected you to head for Fugaku, but I guess you had to take care of Sasuke first? Sasuke needed to leave this place. What was Shisui aware of? Was the clan aware? Why hadn't security been strengthened? Then, a trap. A trap had been set for him. Shisui grinned at him and said, Fugaku isn't here by the way, as the parts came together. There were only 3 chakra signatures that he had found. Shisui must have impersonated Fugaku by donning a disguise. And you know what, I've never cared for the brat. If you really want to, go ahead and do it. I'll let you have 1 kill on the house, Itachi said, looking with nausea at Shisui. Did he truly believe? His thoughts suddenly became clear. He would take advantage of this. He says, you just don't want to get your hands dirty, without showing any emotion or nuance. Furious, Shisui charged at his cousin, looking directly at Itachi as he readied himself to denounce him. There would be no quick escape for Shunshin no Shisui this time. His final memory was a whirl of red and black, the Dujutsu overwhelming him with such speed that his only choice was to die. A victory. After taking Sasuke in his arms, the clone made his way to the border to join Ryuga. Itachi stared at Shisui's motionless body for a moment before he too leapt away, moving in the direction of the council chambers. Now there was no use hiding his tracks. Sasuke had to finish this and get out of there as quickly as possible in order to keep him safe. Even though it didn't seem likely, Shisui could have arrived with a companion. It's possible that Shisui was following orders for once. He didn't want to be a Uchiha pawn or a devoted Konoha dog. He was tempted to leave with his brother and let the elders, with their small-minded politics and prejudices, clean up their own mess. However, he was partially to blame for this circumstance. Had he warned the Sandaime sooner, he simply would have issued the order for execution sooner. Itachi gave himself a shake. No, this would never have happened if Madara hadn't interfered. As he made his way to the council building, he held on to the thought. They couldn't resist him, even if they knew he was coming and it was a trap. That had been ensured by Shisui's death. As he leapt from branch to branch, he felt glee fill him for the first time in years. Danzo had fulfilled his commitment. Soon, the idiot Itachi would be carrying out his planned executions. Despite his intelligence and guile, the boy lacked strength. He wore shackles out of love for his brother and his village, but he was too weak to break them off. Really, it's a shame. Madara could have explained to him that love was erratic and pointless. Power was the only certainty and the only thing that mattered. He would soon have the Kyuubi in his grasp. He could already sense the evil chakra beckoning to him. This was no clone of the shadow. 3 times already, the damn Hitaki had tried to trick him. One more idiot. The young man was quick and adept. By using a variety of tricks and distractions, he had been able to keep Madara at bay for hours. However, he could have used the chakra in combat instead of wasting it on such things. He could have arrived at the Hitaki and his burden more quickly, but what fun would that have been? The excitement of the chase had faded from his memory. A bitter memory caused his lips to quiver. He had been pursuing the mentor of the silver-haired Junin in these same woods the last time he had felt his blood singing with adrenaline. The outcome would be different. Maybe the remaining members of the Hitaki clan were just too scared to fight him. Even though the word, battle, hardly seemed appropriate to describe the course of events, that was what it would ultimately come to. The game was wearing Madara out. This would be another opportunity for retribution, he thought with a smile. Even if the 4th is inaccessible and will spend all of eternity in another plane, his spawn and the remaining pupils would be enough. He had to twist to catch himself when his rhythm faltered. Naruto was significantly lighter than any of his former teammates, and it wasn't the first time Kakashi had escaped a pursuit while carrying a load. The child was much lighter than even the slender, boned cat. However, this pursuer was inhuman. The shinobi pursuing him had been unfazed by the numerous traps and clones he had sent forth. Kakashi had failed to find a way to shake his assailant. The hours passed slowly, but no matter how hard he tried, the hostile chakra signature kept getting closer. He cautiously allowed his mood to improve after Karain gave him a sudden growl. To the east, a group of chakra signatures had emerged. Just past the gates, hours earlier, he had been startled by a tired Ryuga calling out to him. He was even more shocked to learn that Ryuga had no idea why he was there. He only knew that Itachi had sent him a mysterious message asking him to come. Shino, a very talented young pup from Kakashi's pack, was left with Ryuga. The pup would be able to follow him wherever he went. It appeared that Ryuga and Itachi had finally caught up to him. That was excellent. Certain missions simply weren't designed to be completed alone. He was certain now that the shinobi pursuing him was Uchiha Madara. He pushed back the thought that threatened to overwhelm him. The last thing he feared was death. All he cared about was the mission and its success. Every mission was viewed as a component of the village's defense since, in the grand scheme of things, the security of the village was all that really mattered. Each successful mission improved their standing and increased their financial resources. Nevertheless, a persistent worry tore at him, making him angry. It nearly distracted me. This time, what was different? His back began to shift in weight. Naruto. Naturally. It all made sense in a disturbing way. It was only going to help him now, whatever it was. He would put it off until later to resolve the issue. Feeling Ryuga close by, he turned and cursed as he went through a brief, terrifying moment of dislocation. Madara must have concealed his approach with the Chunin. He scowled when he saw Uchiha Sasuke in the Chunin's arms. Itachi. He sent a clone with Sasuke and told me to keep him out of the village. Kakashi, what's going on? Where's the clone? Ryuga, trying to keep up with the Junin's punishing pace, gasped, said he would give us some distraction. Give Naruto to me, he said. He's my responsibility, Ryuga reasoned. You can't bring him into a fight, after carrying the boy out of a terrible battle. Kakashi moved him to the big nin. Dog. Bull will carry him. He can carry them both. Ryuga. The figure in front of them caused both of them to stop. Running away, are we? The hooded figure's evil aura transformed the playful remark into a menacing jest. Let us pass. You know I can't do that, Kakashi. Just give me the Kyuubi and I'll spare the other. Kakashi stated unequivocally, the Kyuubi's gone. The fourth sealed it away, years ago. Semantics. Give me Uzumaki Naruto, and I'll let Itachi's little brother live. It's pointless for you to stand against me. Kakashi continued to say, why bargain, then? You could take them both, every second was valuable. The energy that the chase had stolen was coming back to him. He was aware of Madara's kind. They enjoyed playing with their prey. Kakashi also had no intention of deceiving himself. Up until now, this had only been a game. True. But, I'm disappointed. Two Uchihas and the Yondaime's protege, and this is all you could manage? Haven't you heard of scattering targets? Madara scowled at them. Split and conquer. Kakashi simply looked at him steadily. Madara waved dismissively, never mind, I dealt with your sensei, I can deal with you too. It was like a dull punch to the stomach. Madara laughed at the way Kakashi's chakra surged, sending the leaves in the clearing into a frenzy, and Ryuga gave him a wary glance. Is that all it takes to get a rise out of you? Your sensei? Do you want to know how he begged for me to turn the demon back? How he begged for his own life? You didn't kill him, gritted Kakashi's teeth. Oh no, I didn't, did I? He died for the village and the Sandaime let him. A truly noble way to go, giving his life up to steal the Kyuubi for the leaf. Then, letting explosive tags fly from his hands and relying on Ryuga to free the boys, Kakashi charged at him. Explosions shook the tree Madara had been sitting on, and he fell to the ground. He had failed. He paused as his fingers reached his Sharingan. Within minutes, the Sharingan would sap his vitality. This fight was not about that. He hadn't missed, either. Not going to use the Sharingan, giving up already. What a shame, I would have liked to have seen the copy.nin in action, Madara exclaimed before vanishing. Kakashi ran frantically in the direction of Ryuga's location, watching in horror and shock as Madara appeared next to Bull. As Madara attempted to approach Naruto, the Mastiff yelled and leapt, its strong paws pinning his form. Kakashi was directly behind Ryuga when he lunged, exposing Sharingan's eye and holding lightning in his hands. Kakashi felt his knuckles digging into hard soil as Ryuga cursed, nerves screaming in pain as raw energy poured through them and dispersed into the ground rather than tearing through soft human flesh. With a gentle pop, the Bunshin vanished as Madara's fingers moved through Naruto. Parlor tricks. I would have expected more from Uchiha. Ryuga winced, it worked, didn't it? If they survived, Kakashi concluded he was endorsing the man for Junin. Danzo. Sama. The Uchiha compound has been attacked. You idiots already know. When he arrived at the compound, his happiness vanished. The gates and the stone barriers had vanished, leaving only dust and a faint recollection. Black flames wreathed the squat building where the council had once met, and they were already encroaching on the buildings next to it. They threatened to destroy everything and burn forever. The firefighters were fighting a pointless battle with the fire. He could already see the Inuzukas and their dogs scurrying around the debris, further confusing the situation. The Aburame clan had also been roused from their beds, and swarms of fireflies helped the Anbu secure the area. This night, few people in Konoha would sleep. White, wrapped bodies lay in the midst of the mayhem. Among them lay the chief of the Uchiha clan and the majority of the council elders. Boxes were being carried out, hurriedly packed. Young people, the elderly, and the sick poured out of the compound and the buildings around it in a steady stream, most of them barely conscious and their eyes glassy with confusion. From each of their backs, a red dot and white fan gazed at him, the symbol of the Uchiha clan. A sage old man rounded on him and said, "Danzo, tell them to stop. Water will have no effect on them." One of the Chunins walking by paused at the man's words, asking, "Why not? Only a Sharingan could have invoked them. It must have been the Hitaki. I told you all that he should have been put down years ago. Now look what has happened." Taking the man's arm, the Chunin said, "Grandfather, we can always re-build." The elder jabbed a finger at Danzo and said, "Re-built? The clan council has been slaughtered, our heirs killed. I bet you ordered the Hitaki to do this." "Now is not the time for fighting," said Sarutobi, the cunning jerk who came out of nowhere. "Madahachi-san, please, continue on your way. It is dangerous here. Only a Sharingan could have done this. As Hokage, you are supposed to protect us all. I want to see justice done. Bring the Hitaki here," the elderly man cried, causing the victims gathered outside the makeshift barriers that had been put up around the compound to start muttering indignation. Danzo vanished into the darkness. "I sent Hitaki Kakashi on a mission just this morning. Your accusations are unfounded." The crowd was enraged, asking, who else could have done this? Soon there would be a riot. Danzo let a semblance of hope creep in. "Maybe. I have not been able to find their bodies," Uchiha Mikoto said softly, silencing everyone. "Itachi and Sasuke are still missing." "It must have been Itachi. It's obvious, he must have known the clan wanted to replace him with Sasuke," one of the elderly women boldly said. Mikoto's fury caused everyone to shudder. My son, would never raise a finger against his brother," she said. In most cases, she was not a woman to be crossed lightly. Nobody had the courage to mention that Itachi had never truly belonged to her. The Sandame placated her by placing his hands on her shoulders. "This is neither the time or place to discuss this." The crowd began to scream, "But your home has been desecrated and your kin have been killed. Your anger and your calls for retribution are just. I cannot allow you to harm anyone on a mere suspicion, so I will tell you this. Some amongst you may know that our outermost borders were breached a few weeks ago. 2 teams of Anbu were found dead. Village security has been placed on alert and the Anbu have been combing the leaf for this intruder. Mere hours ago, I was informed that this intruder had attempted to capture Uchiha Sasuke and Uzumaki Naruto. He identified himself as Uchiha Madara to his pursuers." The crowd gasped in disbelief. Danzo was stunned and rooted to the spot. Sarutobi was not supposed to know, so it was impossible. "It is possible that this is the work of the one who calls himself Uchiha Madara. A search team will be assembled for Uchiha Itachi and Uchiha Sasuke within Konoha's borders. If they are still here, they will be found," the Hokage told Mikoto. "You are dishonest. It was I who wrote the scroll for Uchiha Itachi. Or did you say something else to Itachi?" Danzo struggled with resentment and respect, but eventually respect prevailed. Once more, Sarutobi Hiruzen had outwitted him. Unity was bred by adversity. A ninja village on the verge of civil war was best brought together by an outside threat. As he heaved himself to his feet, the world swung sideways. A moan was about to escape his lips. Ryuga, his battered body stretched protectively over Sasuke's motionless form, croaked out, "Kakashi, don't." Kakashi had no other option. Jiraiya would be unable to handle the 9 tails as long as Madara demanded his attention, but Pakun's arrival with the Toad Sennin had been timely. Kakashi stared at the demon. The monstrosity that raged through the trees, frightening Madara and Jiraiya, had nothing left of the boy. It was unable to distinguish friend from enemy. Why, however, would Naruto acknowledge Jiraiya as an ally? There was a part of Kakashi that hoped it would recognize him. He did not know if he could summon another Reikari, and his fingers were too numb to hold a kunai, but he knew it had to be done as he saw another tail appear. Shunshin. His intention was to appear beside Madara, but a burst of red energy caught him by the middle and sent him flying into a maze of tree branches. Recalling fire, death, and chaos, he instinctively shuddered as the Kyuubi's howl filled his ears. It was focusing on him when it screamed once more, closer this time, so close that he could feel the raw energy coming from it. It swung at him once more, but he was seized by powerful arms, and as he was saved, he felt the air burn his wounds. Itachi. Kakashi didn't inquire, despite the fact that the man was covered in blood. Kakashi rasped, "Jiraiya. Sama knows how to seal it," and Itachi left once more. When Itachi joined the battle, Madara became enraged. Itachi wasn't supposed to be here, and he had been waiting too long. Furthermore, he had no intention of confronting the damned Toad Hermit. However, it had been a lot of fun. When the ship woke up, it was incredibly mischievous, feisty, and protective of the shinobi that were watching over it. As if it thought they actually gave a damn. The secret to getting the 9 tails out had been to threaten the Konoha shinobi, particularly the Hatake. He could have caused so much damage if the Kyuubi had been with him. However, the demon refused to be subdued in this state, and he had no intention of doing so while fending off Itachi and the hermit. Such a confrontation was not warranted at this time. Not even the board had been set. There were too many unplanned plans for him to start. The Uchiha boy would have to do for him. Itachi's eyes gleamed at Madara as he stood over the boy and the fallen Chunin. "Mangekyo Sharingan, I should have realized you'd achieve it tonight," Madara laughed. As he mockingly said, "It appears you miscalculated, ancestor," his ego roared to correct the impudent brat. But he was restrained by caution. He was warned off by the swirls of the Mangekyo. He could disable Itachi right now, but Jiraiya would still be there. It was too soon to make himself known. Furthermore, deciding Uchiha Itachi's fate was much too soon. Uchihas were now scarce in the world, after all. He grinned and decided to leave with that final image. "I knew you would do as your village asked of you. But very well, I'll let you have the boy for now. I owe you that much for your work tonight," he said. For the rest of his life, Madara would regret abandoning Uchiha Itachi alive. Even before the Konoha Civil War began, the boy genius had stopped his plans and put an end to it. Smoke plumes rose into the sky, curling into the clouds and blocking out the sun's rays. The fly was the first to spot it, and the sight of it made her gasp. Although this was her forest, her goal was to locate Uchiha Itachi and Uchiha Sasuke. This was home, and something had gone wrong. Coolly, common sense murmured that others would come and look into it. The patrol squads would have noticed, no doubt. It might be useless to rush to her aid and give up on her mission if they are already on the scene. She raised one hand and briefly closed her aging eyes, oblivious to the confusion that was engulfing her squad. To determine whether aid was needed, there was a simpler method. Clusters of chakra were detectable by the average shinobi, who could also tell when a jutsu was being cast nearby. The fly wasn't your typical shinobi. Over great distances, she was able to distinguish individual signatures, and the more familiar a signature was to her senses, the easier it was for her to identify it. The Sandaime had given young Itachi command of the search after they had only completed one mission together. Opening her chakra pathways and preparing for the brief, initial moment of pain that was the standard for her ability, she held her fingers up in a familiar seal. The resulting clamor of sensations threatened to overwhelm her shields before it died down to a dull background roar, allowing her to begin her work. The smoke was pointing northeast, and she easily found a knot of strong signatures by picking out the threads surrounding it. Despite the wolf's low chakra levels, she was able to identify him right away. She had known the White Fang's son since he was a recent academy graduate, no more tall than her knee, and he had accompanied her on numerous missions. She was startled by the presence beside him. Jiraiya. Sama. The Sannin hadn't been in the leaf since the Yondaime's death, and herself. Doubt caused her control to waver. A wave of anger then swept through her. The roiling mashup of fire and brimstone that made her stomach turn was unmistakably the Nine Tails monster. The demon was at the heart of the mayhem plaguing her village once more. She was on the verge of losing her hate when she noticed the Uchiha's subtly flickering fire element natures. She concentrated more, ignoring the way her senses screamed and ignoring the paraphernalia hammering at her from all sides, until she was able to distinguish 3 distinct signatures despite the demon shadowing their presence. One was small enough to be Uchiha Sasuke, the child. The second was not the weasel because it was too pale. The third wavered in an attempt to evade her, but she only needed a quick lock. Itachi was the heir to the Uchiha clan. Both boys had been located, she indicated to the squad. She started in surprise as the jutsu dispelled. Fly. Sama. She disregarded the question. For a fleeting moment, she believed she sensed the Yondaime. Hokage, but it was stupid. They had all been robbed of their Yondaime by the demon. His attention was drawn to the thick copse of trees behind him, where he saw a crow soar into the horizon after a gentle brush against his senses triggered an alert. Soon, the Anbu would arrive. Itachi let his imagination run wild for a moment. He could return. He would make a difference by teaching Sasuke and Naruto how to throw shuriken and by finally getting to know his cousin Ryuga. Reaching up, he unbuckled his armor and emerged from the darkness. Blood covered his hand as the shoulder buckle slipped under his fingers. His left breastplate was covered in a drying splatter, and the wound he had sustained on his shoulder was leaking blood into it. Shizu had not been easily defeated. For a kin slayer, there could be no salvation. He had hoped to spend more time with his brother in order to shape and train him. It had been a fool's hope. Itachi reluctantly stopped tending to Naruto and turned to look at the man hunched over him. He knew it was best to walk carefully because of the overwhelming force that was pulsing through the clearing. He said, "Help is on the way. I'm going after him," and started to walk away, his eyes darting past his younger brother's motionless body. He was hesitant to take more lives tonight, and capture was not the goal. "Wait," Jiraiya said, removing his hands from Naruto and meeting the young Uchiha's eyes. He had heard rumors about Uchiha Itachi. The rule was beneath the surface, and he was all too aware of it. Orochimaru had been his rival and Sarutobi Hiruzen his mentor, but he was still drawn to the young Uchiha. Jiraiya was aware that he wasn't the best person to judge character because he looked too closely and frequently discovered only goodness. Shinobi were never what they seemed, as Sarutobi Sensei had repeatedly warned him. When shinobi were trained to ignore the goodness of the heart, it could mean nothing. However, he could see that a heart was hidden somewhere beneath the icy exterior of Uchiha and the blood-splattered armor. Jiraiya was standing so close to Itachi that he asked, "You're Itachi?" Itachi became acutely conscious of his own vulnerability. He gave a nod. Even Jiraiya knowing his name would have pleased him in a different life. He would have preferred a different name in this life. The boy? Jiraiya was unsure of the reason for the presence of another Uchiha child slumped in the clearing, but the likeness was obvious. Itachi chose not to lie and said, "It's too dangerous to bring him along." He had grown up hearing about this legend, and here was a man who could be a fearsome enemy. He was afraid to try. Jiraiya turned back to the blonde child on the forest floor and said, "I will stay until the Anbu arrive. The third will want to know where you've gone." With a sharp nod, Itachi unbuckled his left armguard and placed it on the ground next to Sasuke. It was a peace offering because a new scent would make it simpler to find him. "We'll cross paths again, Sasuke. I swear." Well, Konoha smelled of spring, of animals in bloom, of moist, earthy soil. He drifted to consciousness with a growing sense of alarm, struggling to place the series of events that had brought him to this moment. Konoha was not cloying wet clay and overpowering overtones of oily fish that stifled the senses. It was a familiar voice saying, "Relax, brat," and his nose confirmed that he was right. This man was not an enemy, even though they were at odds and distant. Calmly, he opened his eyes and pushed back the mounting panic. "Naruto?" Before he could ask, his fingers coiled around the boy. With a hand thrown around Kakashi's waist, the child breathed steadily, but that didn't really tell him anything. He never relaxed, and the last time he had dared, he had forgotten about Naruto. "Jiraiya." "Sama," he said, looking at the Sannin questioningly and wincing as his dry vocal cords cracked, protesting the sudden use. When Kakashi expressed discomfort with the title, Jiraiya smiled and said, "Good morning to you too, brat." Face. "I'm not sure." Kakashi raised a cool eyebrow. Even at 8 and recently orphaned, Hitaki Kakashi had refused to be anyone's charge. "I'm just here watching my charge," the man shrugged. "Not you." The boy kept asking after Uchiha Sasuke, but he wouldn't leave your side. Who would have guessed that an Uzumaki would become friends with Fugaku's son? They had not spoken much in the years since Minato's death, and both of them preferred solitude to the reminder of the ghosts that bound them together. Dead men who had loved too much and left too early, but it was easy to fall back into routine. Jiraiya gave him an unreadable look before bursting into a wide smile, saying, "I can't believe he's staying with you." Hands dipped into his hair, messing up the already unruly silver strands in affection. "We aren't in Konoha," Kakashi finally muttered, breaking the soothing quiet. "Before the Anbu showed up, Uchiha Ryuga gave me the rundown. It wasn't easy to convince the Anbu that you didn't need a trip to the Konoha infirmary, Jiraiya said lightly, adding, the scroll your summon past me had orders for us to spirit Naruto to a hideaway. Jiraiya's expression was solemn. Brat, you might have died. What about Naruto? He would never care about death, so he disregarded the reprimand. The child will be alright. I've undone the majority of it. To what extent are you familiar with seals? Just a little, was all Minato Sensei had ever had time or life to give him. Jiraiya moaned, that will need to be fixed. I'm not going to stay here forever. I still need to find the snake bastard. As Kakashi noted, even Hokage Sama couldn't undo the damage. I don't think so. He was aware that I was in the forest, Jiraiya said with a slight smirk as Kakashi's eyes began to light up. The third had somehow planned this sequence of events, but why would he expose Naruto to Itachi? He clutched at the ephemeral recollection. The boy went after Madara. Kakashi was alarmed and got out of bed, gritting his teeth as he felt excruciating pain. On his own? Jiraiya shrugged and said, he came up behind you, and I thought he had orders. In addition, the kid had a reason. According to the Anbu, Madara demolished the compound and murdered the elders of the Uchiha clan. Itachi must have desired retribution. Bile rose in Kakashi's throat, and he briefly closed his eyes as he recalled how slowly viscous droplets of blood, no older than an hour, had trickled off Itachi's armor in the forest glade. What were they forcing you to do? He opened his eyes suddenly and said, just the clan elders. Jiraiya's eyes narrowed. Only the elders and the guards at the security outposts were killed, as far as the Anbu was aware. Why? The execution must have been the village council's heartless response to the mutiny threat, Kakashi thought as he slowly shook his head, recalling the treachery he had read in Itachi's stance when he had followed the Sandame's instructions and gone with Naruto. The Uchiha were planning a coup. Jiraiya's keen intake indicated that the elder understood what he was saying. Madara's execution was timely, he spat out, startled by the vehement edge to his own voice. Jiraiya fell silent as she said, the third would do whatever it took to keep Konoha safe. The Anbu had orders for Itachi, I passed them on with a summon, Jiraiya finally said, his own brain processing the new information, and Kakashi slumped back against the headboard at the words. The weasel was no missing. Nin, regardless of what he had done. He was overcome with nausea once more, and he forced his eyes shut while trying to maintain his composure. Damn it, he wanted his mask. Shinobi were tools. He had known this since his first C rank, when his sword had pierced an enemy. Nin's heart, and he had seen the man's eyes go dull before he slid the blade back out. The knowledge that they were all merely willing pawns whose deaths didn't matter was a comfort to him at the time. How had Itachi felt standing over his own father's body 14 years later, when his village had sent a boy to kill members of his own clan? Kakashi could feel Jiraiya's hand hovering over his left shoulder, and he took a deep breath, trying to erase the memory of a pale-haired man on the floor, bleeding to death, an arm thrown out to his only son. Don't consider it. He quickly recovered from the dizzying vertigo and retreated under his bed's covers, but Jiraiya held onto his shoulder tightly, seemingly sensing his thoughts. Kakashi. With just enough warning from the loud cry, he braced himself as arms threw themselves around his neck and squeeze. Kakashi remembered Naruto's refusal to accompany him home, and he gasped out, Naruto, reaching up to loosen the death grip on his neck before wrapping his arms around the small, frail form clinging to him. A knot of anxieties that had been growing since he woke was melted away by the warmth that spread through him. With tiny fists obstinately worrying away at his eyes, the child clung to him and sniffed before glaring at Kakashi with a petulant expression. I thought you were going to sleep forever and ever, the elderly man said. I'm not old, I told you, brat. You have white hair. His hair is silver. Jiraiya gestured at Kakashi with a finger. You are not as old as Kakashi. He's also more cool than you. Brat, how do you know? Under that mask, he might be very, very old. In addition, I'm more attractive than him, Jiraiya said, puffing out his chest. I know what Aniki looks like because I'm smarter than you. Oh no, dwarf, don't lie. There's no way you could know. I'm not small. I also know, you see, he doesn't wear a mask at home, and he's not wearing one at the moment. Kakashi yelled as his bandaged chest and face were revealed to the world, and the smile he had been wearing vanished as Naruto pulled at the covers, causing them to slide to the ground. Naruto. His muscles trembled and gave in to gravity's pull the moment he strained them, sending him in an ungraceful arc toward the floor until Jiraiya gently pulled him back onto the bed. He looked anxiously at the door, a hand flashing up to cover his face as he fumbled for the sheets. Kakashi, take it easy, he said, struggling to stay conscious, but he forced his head to turn after hearing a sob. The world was hazy and unfocused, and he had to squint before he could place the blonde and thrash out an arm toward him. For a terrifying moment, he saw the image of the Kyuubi imposed upon him, and his arm fell. Red, Naruto was wearing a red shirt. It wasn't the Kyuubi. Just Naruto. No malicious chakra, no overwhelming killer intent. His hands trembled excessively, but Jiraiya quickly recognized his intention and guided the boy into Kakashi's arms. Shish, Naruto, he said, unable to even begin to speculate as to why the boy was crying. There were too many reasons. They were in a strange place, and the explosion at Ryuga's apartment was likely the last thing Naruto remembered. Kakashi's jaw tensed, and he drew the boy closer, hoping that Naruto had no memory of waking up in the forest and losing control of the Nine Tails power. I didn't mean it, Kakashi would have grinned, but Naruto had wrapped his arms around him in another death grip, and the boy was trembling like a genin after his first kill. I forgot you don't like it, Naruto cried out against him. Sometime during the outburst, Jiraiya left and came back now, holding 3 steaming bowls in his big hands, laughing at Naruto's expression of regret. Kid, don't worry. He ruffled Naruto's hair and said, you aren't the first blonde to unmask Kakashi against his wishes. Kakashi glared at Jiraiya, remembering the year long ago when Minato and Jiraiya had made it their game to try to unmask him whenever they could, and he was still having nightmares. In order to divert Naruto's attention, they filled the bowls with spicy soup and noodles, and the answer was always, or used to be, ramen. Teary blue eyes darted from the bowls to Kakashi. I assumed you enjoyed ramen? Naruto, do you require my food? The boy yelled and leapt from the bed when Kakashi drew lead. I'm not a baby. Jiraiya took the cue to break open his own chopsticks before pausing and sweeping a glance over the sluggish form in the bed. He grabbed the closest bowl and sucked down the broth before starting to eat noisily, ignoring the amused looks that were exchanged over his head. Jiraiya laughed, brat, it looks like you're the one who needs feeding. He hadn't seen a Hitaki in such a precarious situation in decades. I'd rather die. When Naruto saw that, he asked, is it okay if I take your bowl? Not a chance. Kakashi continued to surreptitiously observe Naruto for a few more seconds, in anticipation that the boy would put down the empty bowl and bring up the topic. Naruto, do you recall what happened? The boy looked down and away, saying, I was with Sasuke and then the explosion, and then. The old man told me Sasuke's fine, right? When confronted with a quivering Naruto, Kakashi had no choice but to nod despite his inability to be certain. And we're here. To protect me. Relieved that Jiraiya had clarified the situation, Kakashi nodded once more. I won't ask to see Sasuke again, Naruto firmly stated. Did you get into a fight? Kakashi scowled. He hadn't been ready for this dejected, solemn child. He had been expecting to deal with a pouting Naruto, or worse, an enraged Naruto who would demand to go home and play tricks on Kakashi to try to get what he wanted. No, I am dangerous, so I can't. As Naruto ran out of the room, the ramen bowl clattered to the ground. If his limbs had obeyed him, Kakashi would have followed, but instead he shivered against the bed frame, wishing he could do more. Jiraiya scowled. Naruto seems to remember more than he let on, she said. Are you not pursuing him? He has to learn to deal with it alone, Jiraiya said, shaking his head. According to Kakashi, he's just a boy, and he hates being alone, she said firmly. Kakashi has always been more than just a boy. Jiraiya looked at the wounded shinobi and said, he'll never be treated like just a boy. A lesser shinobi, one who had never met Jiraiya, would have called the man cold because his eyes were dark and casual, and his mouth was set in a grim, unshakable line. Kakashi knew better, and he could read the grief in those eyes. Naruto's fate had been sealed shortly after his birth, and for a while, it had been so simple to act as though he was simply the Hokage's orphan son. A boy with an extraordinary lineage and the genetic potential to become a powerful shinobi, and nothing else. Isn't it necessary to tell him? Kakashi came to the painful conclusion that, given Madara's search for him, he needed to know, if only for his own safety, the answers to the questions that would arise no matter how much Naruto remembered of the fox's takeover. Jiraiya gave a sharp nod. It seemed absurd to ask an orphan if he should know his parentage, but could he handle it? Would he be able to comprehend why the Yondaime had decided to turn his own son into a vessel and a weapon? What about Sensei? Kakashi stammered, his throat catching around the words. Though the possibility was all too real, Kakashi could not bear to consider the possibility that Namikaze Minato might be despised by his own people. Jiraiya was unable to respond.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.